Okay. This is the new Vice Chancellor. And there will be a, what?
I did.
I like his glasses, actually. Just quite a good look. Anyway, okay, we are all here. Today, Lauren, you're going to basically kick it off. I wanted to, before we begin, just once again go around so you can remember what you're doing and alter it if you need to. Remind people who are applying for the PhD program that to try and get your application. Are you applying as well? Yeah, to try and get your applications in mid-March if you're going to go for the award that we're giving out here. And that, like I said, there are some that are going through welcome as well. And I would also recommend anybody that does performance or can somehow work it so that what can be understood as performance. The London Arts, no, you've gotten the words in, those Keaton. Yeah, the Live Art Development Agency. They're great, and they often can give out like £5,000 here, £5,000 there, that kind of thing. And so that's kind of an interesting group, the Live Arts Development Agency. If worse comes to worse, there's always the AHRC, and we can apply. I mean, not the fellowship one, but the applying for performance stuff. See if that works. The Latin. You know that's bad. You're laughing.
No, because I suffered already.
I know.
Everything the worst comes to worst is the bottom line.
It really is the worst going to worse, isn't it? Okay. Okay. So the other thing I'd like to say is that I personally would like to arrange for us to go to New York. If we could do it over in April, over the Easter thing, but that might be too soon for you to figure out how to get money, because there's no money. The question is, if I can figure out ways to get cheap flights, would you be interested? By cheap, I mean probably £200 round trip, £185 round trip, something like that. I think it might be just to go. We could all stay in the Chelsea. Well, you guys can stay in the Chelsea Hotel. I'll stay with my brothers, which is maybe I'll end up staying in the Chelsea. No. Anyway, but I think it might be kind of fun. So I wanted to put that in your minds to see if that would make sense. Just to, if that's too soon, we could try for June, or when it's.
Well, June also dies down.
I know.
May is the last.
I know it's the last winter of art.
Is this like a particular thing we're going to see?
No. There could be, though. I mean, there might be something interesting. Or we could go to MIT, which would be also interesting. And it's not nearby. You can't just sort of jump over and go. I mean, you could, but it's like I think it's about a 2-hour train ride or something, 3-hour train, 4-hour train ride. Whatever it is, it's not around the corner. So we have to go to either Boston or we go to New York. Okay. We have the lunchroom over here. That's right, that's the lunch. Okay. All right. Shall we go around and we'll go to Barnaby last, since he's leaving. But give you time to finish your little sandwich.
I've got a little.
That's just looking point. Okay. Okay.
My research is an art.
Name.
Oh, Lauren Good. My research is an artist event, and the work of art as event. Oh, sorry. How are you geared up for this? Other presentation. But yes, it's the notion of the work of art as event and the criticality of event. The criticality of notions of event in the contemporary arts and sciences, and then the politicality of event and art as event, and then there's a fine arts practice element with working with growing environments. And the three main areas I was thinking around are immanence, dispossession, and immersivity. But one thing I've been thinking about, or coming back to just currently, is the phrase pattern is not identity. I just wanted to say I thought that might be.
And who said that?
I said it. Probably lots of people said it. And perhaps the second one might be, it's not the same thing anymore to be a robot. With the idea that really robots now can be, have the capacity to be visionary.
Or sensuous?
Yeah.
Or both.
Yeah.
Okay, that's quite interesting. I'll come back to challenge you on those. That's excellent. And you did well, considering you hadn't planned for that. That's good.
My name is Mattia. My interests are not that far from Laura, actually. I also work in the space between, if there is a space in between art and some notions of science, concentrating on how it works according to the notion of emergence that comes from complexity theory, and particularly about time and temporality in emergence, how it works, what comes first, if these questions still make sense or not. The work comes from the experience as an artist, and the curiosity has taken to mix it and try to unpack it from the epistemological angle. Although Lauren and I never seem to agree with that. And that's what I am. And I find Heidegger challenging at least, because some things are very, very interesting and some of the things are not, I don't agree with them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we'll get back to that today. Can you shut the door? Do you mind saying? Thank you.
My name is Gianpaolo, and I'm thinking about the relevance of making as a form of resistance, or kind of it's maybe in conjunction with thought and knowledge, and maybe writing as a shamanic process, and what wild experience can be also in relation to thinking.
What, wild?
Wild experience.
Oh, nice. By wild, you mean what?
Well, both
Pardoning.
that which isn't possible to kind of bring into a kind of rational scheme, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
But also that maybe stepping out, some form of stepping out and stepping away.
Interesting. Okay. Did everybody hear that? We know your name, but just say it louder.
Interested in question of
Samira. Sorry, go on.
Interested in question of becoming, being of becoming, and also the surface.
And would you be working that into your paintings?
Yes.
So the kind of work you'd be doing is playing around the question of being in relationship of becoming, being of becoming. Oh wow, okay. And then in relationship to the texture of what you're doing. Okay, very interesting. Getting tighter and tighter these arguments. Okay.
I'm Dane. I'm interested in science of senses and cognition, specifically things like immersive data, digital environments in that sort of setting. That's one part of my research. The other bit's in film, work, cinema, looking at the whole range of cinema, find how it sort of draws people in, suspends disbelief, sort of thing. And another perspective is uncertainty and incompleteness. So dealing with the sort of desterilisation of physics by quantum mechanics and viruses as transmission vectors across ideas and planes, and weaving in some Gödel as well, some dirty
Gödel.
Gödel.
Yeah, although yesterday when I was giving my discussion on telos, there was someone who was Greek, this very young woman, and she kept saying, telos, that doesn't exist in Greece, in Greek, it doesn't, and it turned out, she says, oh, you mean delos. Yes, delos. So, and do you think that that's linked to art, this thing called art?
Yeah.
Good, that's the right answer. or better way of putting this is, I'm assuming that this is what your field is going to be, is like, how is that linked?
Yeah, and you sort of channel these ideas of uncertainty and incompleteness where there's sort of spaces where things sort of become unstuck or they stick in a different way, how you sort of channel that through. Because vector and line of flight.
One of the things that seems to have been mentioned a couple of times now is this word immersive. And maybe science, in the quanta sense, is this immersive, method or this immersive paradigm that you're thinking through, something like that. Okay, good.
I'm Grace, and I'm interested in what authenticates things that are doubtful, so the differentiation between irrational and rational kind of in culture, and focusing towards the figure of the female medium and how she kind of permeated history.
In terms of that being someone who lends legitimacy or non-legitimate, like firms up the doubt or gets rid of the doubt. Is the vessel for doubt.
Yeah, it's the vessel for doubt. Well, I don't know, I'm not very good at it today, sorry. But in terms of my artwork, developing it so that it kind of looks at fakery and deception, that's always where my artwork's kind of revolved around. So I think I'll leave it there today because I'm sorry, I'm really not very with it.
Okay, you're all right.
Yeah, I'm just not very well, so my brain's not functioning.
Oh, okay. So just breathe.
That's
That's right, okay.
It's Mark Walker. And I have planned for this introduction. I'm going to quote it from Jean-Luc Nancy. Is that Nancy?
Nancy.
Where he says, I can't do it, so I have to pass it over to Mathieu. What's that?
What? I mean, already.
Is that the Greek?
It's French.
That's you wrote it.
What's it? No,
It's in
what's-
English.
What's it say? The l'oubli.
Jean-Luc Nancy, the l'oubli de la philosophie, the oblivion or the forgetting of philosophy.
The forgetting of philosophy. So this is from Jean-Luc. He says, when you introduce yourself and give your name, it does not mean anything. It does not take place because it is first of all the presentation of the place, that of your presence and of your naming. This is a very simple and even very humble truth, which doubtless for the moment does not mean a great deal, one which as an epoch attests we have to think.
Sorry, say that again.
Is that too ridiculous or too fast, perhaps?
Well, my phone rang in the middle of it, so if you don't mind reading it out again.
And it says, when you introduce yourself and give your name, it does not mean anything. It does not take place because it is first of all the presentation of the place, that of your presence and of your naming. This is a very simple and even very humble truth, which doubtless for the moment does not mean a great deal, one which, as our epoch attests, we have to think.
Translation.
I was trying to use it to obfuscate what I was going to actually say.
So you did a good job then.
Yes. I think it means it's like context specific. It says very little about what we actually do and actually what we do as I said, their league or in their lives. I think the hidden depths are here. This coming together, this table, though, this is certainly where so much happens, and to have Diane here as already creating a whole new field.
Diane.
Yeah, well, a whole new,
Be fearful, be very
a whole
worried.
new field, a whole new book list, or say, a whole new readings. So started with this one today, the techniques and time because you're talking about your culture, not museums, and technical transmission of tertiary memory, this kind of thing. So as a researcher, this is what to do, and same as this one comes on stage because of the quadruple object that's actually discussed there. And then this today, the introduction to logic, in case we get into
Who did that?
this is by a day. His name is Justice Hartnack. Instruction to logic, in case we need to sort of, I thought I might try and just read it about if we get into the A equals A and the A, what actually Heidegger says. What actually Heidegger says, reference to identity and difference, just to give people here what it is that when Heidegger's talking about the representational thinking and the A, and let's something that A equals A and A is A and something and something else and stuff. I just thought maybe read a couple of passages so that people here could hear
Excellent. I mean, I think with Jean-Luc Nance's remark that, giving your name is meaningless is a kind of typical, I say this with love, but a typical philosophic conceit around the fact that definitions don't tell you everything. And to the degree to which your name is being put forward as a definition of who you are, that's correct, it's not telling anything. But your second part of your introduction about how the name gets embedded in the table and how the name then starts to kind of permeate, or sometimes it ossifies and sometimes it shifts. That to me is why we do this, also because it helps one remember what you're doing from week to week or completely change it, and so that's it. There's a flexibility involved, hopefully. So the naming process is really the nicknaming process, which is something that a lot of the philosophers have trouble with. They only deal with nouns for some reason. The name of the father or something, and not the nickname of the father, that kind of problem. And I think this is kind of a nicknaming environment.
Are you Johnny or Sue here?
Johnny.
Do they all stick to that, or do they? Because at the old place, some people would you were still Sue, weren't they?
Yeah, I mean, I'm Johnny, I'm Sue, but in terms of what the difference is that in this institution, when I came here, I was told you have to go by one name. You cannot go by two names. It's too confusing. And and so damn, game was up on that one. So I said, okay, I'll go by Johnny because I'm less well known by Johnny. I think I'd rather go by the nickname than by the formal name. Even though Sue is actually a nickname as well on some level, but anyway, not to get too complicated about that.
Okay, so artist, first of all,
name?
Diane Wiltshire, looked at mostly virtual reality to start with, and then augmented amplified reality, mainly in the heritage sector. I think that at the moment I can kind of sum it up as I'm interested in experience and what's the point, or why is it useful, and how is it useful this week?
It's not.
So
It's very simple. Experience teaches you to do only one thing, and that it doesn't teach you anything is usually the line by at least Wittgenstein and co. Did you ever?
Heidegger himself
I know.
was interested in experience, but then people like Adorno and Benjamin, it's all about the recovery.
I know. And then there's Kant, who wades in with his experience and taste. Did you ever check out MIST at Cambridge? A museum interface, space and technology, something like that. And they they just put together a huge bundle of funding to set up this Neanderthal man, which is like just a knife in the head, Anyway, so when they finally got funding to come up with augmented reality, that's what they came up with too. And so what it is that a Neanderthal man walks around with the children and explains from the, quote, perspective of Neanderthal man what it was to be in the year 1 or whatever it was. Now, personally, I think it's just so insane that I want to go.
He goes back down to the pub and watches football.
That's right. That's right. I mean, where's the club? I just would like to know what they're taking as a given and then putting forward. But it might be interesting for you, considering that it is a big thing with the augmented reality crowd.
Is that it's not a main costume, it's digital.
It's a digital hologram, basically. Well, it's augmented reality, so it's not a hologram either.
Right.
It's been set. It's been projected out from. Do you know how the difference between augmented reality and holograms?
No.
Can you explain that?
Not really.
I mean, they kind of look the same.
Right.
In a certain sense. I mean, in the sense that if you're looking at a hologram, it seems as though it's functioning very much like an augmented reality. But augmented reality is actually like those, what are they called, QRs, or when you have that QR codes. Augmented reality works off of a QR code, so you actually have these codes that anyone can have, and you can start manipulating an image that will then come out, let's say, in the middle of the table, and will interact with you in a way that the hologram can't do.
Because the hologram is optical.
Yeah.
digital.
Yeah.
So you
Do you have to
cannot-
look at this thing through something?
No,
No, that's one of the.
That's why it's creepy.
The hologram
How many
is
cameras are, how many projections are kind of creating this?
you can have only one if you want, or you can not even have a projection on a monitor or a screen. But the hologram is based on something like a printed image on a specific material that
Yeah.
has the peculiarity that however many times you break it, it retains the whole image in it. And it looks 3D,
Yeah.
but it is optical. You have to look at it in the right light. And while
Like with things on rulers, yeah?
sometimes yes.
Like that simple kind of.
So
So
that means
yeah, that's good enough for that example.
that's a
Yeah.
holographic effect.
Things on rulers.
You know these images that, is that not a hologram?
I don't
if
know.
you look at it
What do you
from
mean
one
by thing
angle,
on a
it's
ruler?
one image and then it
No, that's
Oh, I see, oh, I see.
No.
Right,
That's
no.
a particle board. It's just a particle board.
Oh, okay.
Then it goes up like this in a wiggle surface, and it's got one photograph printed.
Oh, okay.
The face is on this side and another one on this side. So depending on how you move, you see
Yeah.
blinking movement or something like that. That's what
Sorry.
I once worked at a nightclub, a mad sort of Playboy type nightclub, and it was called Dimples. And it had an eye on the dimples, which winked across your breast, you know. And I loved this place. I thought I was just I thought I was fantastic. And so that when someone pinched me on my bottom, I was so shocked. I took all the beer and threw it on this guy and told the management to arrest him. I was fired on the spot, so I didn't last very long on that particular guy. That was my first awakening to feminism. But you know, yeah. But that's what it reminds me of, this kind of hologram eye that you get. Anyway, so the augmented reality is a little bit.
you interact through it in various different ways, and then there's one product. It's not necessarily a camera. You can have the opposite. There was a shop in London that had something that looked like a mirror, and you pick up a boxed toy and see yourself with the toy all assembled in the mirror.
It's very creepy. The biggest sort of market for it at the moment has been older age Japanese men whose augmented reality image is a 13-year-old girl that they undress. And that is a very big selling item. And I think we brought that person to ICAS, actually. I don't know if Tony did you
What,
see
the
it?
Japanese guy?
Yeah, not the Japanese guy, but
Oh, I was
the
gonna
little
say.
girl.
Oh, right.
You missed that, Barnaby.
I remember.
That's right.
There was an advert in Victoria Station in London last year, 2 years ago, where you would be on the floor of the station waiting for your train platform to appear. And there was a circle or space marked on the floor. And if you were in that space, in the big monitor with the adverts that is running over the information, you would see an angel next to you. And then it was
God, I missed that.
Coca-Cola or something like that. It was very tacky, but there was this, and the angel looked real as if it were next to you in reality, but it wasn't next to you, it was just in his plane.
And then you jump into the train, and
Yeah.
you know, it's all
Travel
bad.
safe.
All bad from there. Okay, Barnaby, your turn.
My name's Barnaby. I'm interested in darkness and
Hence the shirt.
yeah, and the possibilities for the introduction of authority into a post-conceptual space, predicated on. The space is predicated on orality. The darkness implies an orality in attention to acoustic models rather than figurative ones.
So if you say authoritative, do you mean
When I say-
legitimate?
No, I mean like vectors.
Okay, I don't understand what.
I mean,
What do you mean?
I mean lines and kind of a kind of Cartesianism which exists like once the concept has been transgressed.
Okay.
Waves.
So you're thinking about how a limit is established in a discontinuous field.
Yes, exactly. Yes, I like it.
Write that down.
Do you mind?
No, not at all. Okay,
Can I put one quick comment on this? I've had time to think.
okay, yes.
Here I've got one name, but in another place I've got another name. I'm known by that other name, and there's like.
And do they ever cross over, those
Yes,
names?
they do, but it's very much two different conversations. Here it's philosophy, there it's more about music and stuff. But we really do know we have something completely different on this other name. So I think that's the kind of presence of place and name. It's a nickname. It's a nickname.
I almost feel like
It's given, it's a nickname.
Tennessee, is it, maybe it's E.E. Cummings or Tennessee Williams, one of them, wrote about cats having different names. And this is the name you name your cat, and then it's the name the cats go by with each other. And then there's some other name that happens, like they'll say their formal name. But, yeah, but do you feel totally different, depending which name you
It's
have?
just, well, it's strange having a name, this other name that I never, was given to me as it were, but
Right.
I don't really identify with, or rather there's a disjoint between me and I wouldn't choose it,
Mhm.
kind of thing. So,
Do you want to share that name?
It's at the other place.
Well, not necessarily, because that's the other thing, you don't necessarily,
It'd be like a vine, people start calling me by this other name.
uh-oh, that would be wrong. I found that by keeping the names separate, Sue and Johnny, what was happening is that silos of knowledge were being created, and I didn't like that. I liked the idea that there would be a laterality somehow. So I started playing around with that other thing, which gets me to what I'm doing right now, which is I'm rewriting parts of Ecce Homo as Ecce Homosexual. Behold the fag, basically, or behold the whore. Is pretty much what that's about in terms of thinking immersive philosophy, calling it immersive philosophy. That's what I'm doing at the moment. So, okay, shall we begin? Any other questions? Do you want to say anything else about this?
What do you do for, why am I so wise? Why am I so...
Clever. Why do I write such good books?
Yeah, so how did you answer that? Have you answered that? Rewrote that? Yeah. Interesting, I'd like to see that.
She's same with me. Anyway, okay, ready? Ready to begin? Lauren? Uh-oh. No, I'm sorry, I didn't think that was very bad of me.
I have to have my notes. This is how I go about things, I don't know.
Then we're going to need a bigger boat.
It's okay, I've written like 3.
Is this going to be shared, or?
Yeah, I can draw in it, I guess. I think I
It is paginated.
yeah, just put it in the right order, sorry.
I was reflecting on this on the train up, about reading Heidegger's first Freiburg lecture and the universality of thought. And I was thinking, there's a sort of supposition that everybody thinks the same. And I was thinking about Lauren, and I felt fairly sure that whatever she was going to do today would be not the way that I would possibly do
Not
it.
the way to do
I don't
it.
want to kind of like separate this out. But
them.
I thought there is absolutely no universality. He's evidently quite wrong about this thing, you know. But there we go.
Thank you, Lauren, for proving Barnaby correct.
So, yes, okay, so this is like, I've got the page references from when I'm sort of quoting, but it's the lecture 1 book that I'm going to sort of go through, so focus on that. And,
Is that the thing?
so,
Is that the thing, das thing?
no.
The name of that lecture is
Sorry.
the thing.
No.
I don't know the lecture.
The insight into that which is,
Oh.
and the basic principle of thinking.
Oh, well, it's called lecture 1.
The basic principle of thinking, yeah. Which is the same as the principle of pragmatic indifference.
Yeah, so,
Where are we?
well, page 77.
Very much. Yeah, this is another one.
Are we doing Freiburg?
Yes.
Well, what we're doing is the question of identity and thinking. So, and Lauren's presenting the question of identity. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so I thought, because he has a very sort of, he seems like, I was sort of noticing his style, and he, I mean, sometimes you don't, but there seems to be like a part, it's sort of very specific. Well, I don't know. To me, I noticed the questions and he sort of answers them in a sort of more obvious way as a sort of technique. So I decided I would pull out the questions on one side and make my notes, and then because then I could then sort of kind of draw together what the questions were, and that might help as a process. So I think there was 18 questions, but there isn't. Some of them are more like chunked together. But anyway, so the first one, I might just read. Well, the first thing I'm really going to discuss is he puts sort of the issue of proof on the table. The first thing really he's introducing the principles of thinking as the laws of thought, and so basic principles of thinking guide and regulate the activity of thinking. But then the question is, if viewed correctly, the fundamental principles cannot be proven. So that's a really important thing he's put on the table. So the proof therefore already stands under the laws of thought. How could it presume to place itself above these in the order first to justify the truth? So the question, sorry, that was the lead. Oh no, that was a question. How could the proof, i.e. of the principles of thought, the laws of thought, presume to place itself above the laws of thought in order to first justify the truth? So then we get into these
Before you go on, does everybody get that as a question? If you want to translate that.
How does proof place itself above thinking is the question, I think.
In order to prove that there are laws around thinking.
Yeah.
So you need to use the material. He problematises it by saying you can't use the material to address the subject.
Right.
And that's what the problem is.
That's what the problem is. So
it's like painting about painting.
Yeah.
It's like the creation becomes the creator.
Right.
Kind of thing. It feeds back, it comes back around.
And also, how does one actually use the language when the language itself is not formed enough to use the language? And if it were formed enough, then it would be a paradox, because then it would not be able to prove that it was above the language it was using. It's basically the problem you were identifying with your own question of how the limit gets established in a discontinuous field.
Yeah, so, and the important thing is he's saying that these fundamental principles cannot be proven. But in terms of what these fundamental principles are, what these the laws of thought are that he's setting out, it is the principle of identity, the principle of contradiction, and the principle of the excluded middle, which we kind of obviously mentioned a lot like last week as well. So this is the principle of identity is the A equals A, with the criticality of how this has been understood. And then the principle of contradiction is that A does not equal A. And then the principle of the excluded middle, X is either A or not A. And then the important thing he's going to sort of get to sort of showing is how there's what he calls a hidden contrariety, like the principle of contradiction. There's a hidden contrariety involved in the principle of identity. So to say the A equals A, or to claim the claim of A is A, requires a sort of a contradiction. Well, I'm not sure that he's actually saying that, but this is what he put on the table as what's stuff that's going on here.
Before you go on, does anybody know what the principle of excluded middle is actually referring to in dialectics? What is being excluded in dialectics?
We're going to come to dialectics.
But just so we know what this principle is.
Thesis and the antithesis are both excluded.
No, that's why I wanted to make this very clear.
You said it's A is either A or not A.
Yes, but it's the division, the excluded middle. If everything A is on this side and everything not A is on this side, then that which is excluded is this middle bit, which is the deep cut. And basically what's being said here is that the question of the abyss, which is normally written as such, as an abyss, as an in-between, something like that, is wrong, basically. And the question of the excluded middle, that's this thing, is problematized because if you accept that this is the division, then the contradiction follows that A is not A, so on, and then suddenly the Hegelian move all makes sense, but he's criticizing that. He's basically saying there's a different way of understanding abyssal logic, and there's a different way of understanding how this set of equality, identity, and contradiction gets established. You don't have to go to dialectics per se to do that. And that this is crucial because this becomes the basis of his notion of thinking, right?
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Well, the first thing, can I quote one of your sayings about this, which was, I think, what you said that an example years ago was George Bush and the war against terror.
Yes.
Where he said, you think, was the effect that you're either with us or you're against us. That was you're either for the war on terror or you're a terrorist. Was the example of the excluded middle. There was no middle ground in the argument, in this political argument, which was a real argument. And probably still is a real argument. It's still very much so that's the example. I'm not sure about the description of Hegel, of that as a Hegel.
I'm going to really get to Hegel in
Yeah.
detail on page 2.
Good jump in. Yes, on page 2. Okay.
Not
Really a page 2. Okay.
Just doing the.
But just so you're clear about the excluded middle, you're right to say politically, you could say between leaders and led. So there's no in between. There's no like petit bourgeois, that kind of thing. There's no something that can go one way or can go the other way on the one hand, and on the other hand, there's no in between. So the question of, let's say, transgender, which is politically a lot of people would call themselves in between, doesn't exist in this way. Wittgenstein actually gets into this, which you, I think, probably had some awareness of in his remarks on mathematics and also his question concerning certainty, where he says that if, with the law of the excluded middle, maybe there's just something wrong with the picture, and the picture itself has to be thought differently. And we'll get back to that, I'm sure we will. But just so you're conscious of how these terms are being used, excluded middle, identity, contradiction, so on. Yes.
I just have one small
Lauren
point
gets
into
to
this.
one section of her.
Last week we briefly looked, or tried to remember what Parmenides was saying, which
Right.
Heidegger keeps coming back. And of the three fragments of Parmenides, the most referred to is being is, non-being is not. And this leaves out entirely any discussion about what is becoming, because becoming needs some space, some room for movement, which would be non-being, and well, how does it move? So it's a sort of excluded middle that is beyond the surrounding boundary of what is, and is a problem that from the beginning of philosophy has been there, and Heidegger is directly referring to this, it seems to me.
Yes.
So when it's an excluded middle that doesn't have to be geometrically in between things. It can be logically somewhere, creating a problem for the identity.
Yes. That's very well said. Did people get that? We may have to pass out Diet Coke for it. We need to be very focused on this. This is going to be a minutia type of discussion today. Anyway, go on. We'll get back to it, but you're right.
Well, I suppose it's like, I thought the first step is to sort of just set those laws of thought on the table, but then before I sort of go into more detail, I think the things that I was sort of picking out that he was identifying was he then, on the next step, he brings in this instant, which he refers to as historical, the historical instant by which thinking has entered into the dimension of dialectics, and the key things that I want to talk about is, well, there's the incident, and then there's an impending. This impending relates to authentic history. It's an impending, so if you want to the incident, the impending.
So you're saying incident or instant?
Incident.
Incident,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
I heard you.
Well, this is what he.
Yeah, no,
so these are the key words I was pulling out. And so after the impending, it's a work as an imposition. So this idea of imposition is key, and authentic history, future, but this relates to this historical incident. We'll just do a map question 3, after having set those out, he's saying, but now what significance does the incident mentioned above have for the tasks that should concern us here, for the consideration of the laws of thinking? So he's going to go back to the laws of thinking and sort of problematise it differently. After this kind of talking about the historical sort of aspect, he gets into sort of the dimension of dialectic as a historical one. It comes as the present. So this is important, kind of that particular present, getting across to what is meant by that present is a key thing. With dialectic, we have a transformed form of the principles of thinking. So he's unpacking it, and then he's showing you a transformed kind of way of interpreting these formulas. So they mean something else. And then he gets into Hegel and shows how Hegel is operating them with his dialectical theories.
And can you read from Heidegger a
Yes,
supporting
sure.
comment that would support those claims that you're making?
Should I go more in detail?
Yes.
Yeah. So in terms of the incident, this he refers to the incident. Is page 78. The incident that befell the history of Western thinking 1.5 centuries ago, with the efforts of Fichte, Schelling, Hegel, and prepared for by Kant.
So what about this review?
Middle of the page.
Thinking was brought into another dimension of its possibilities in certain respects, its highest. Thinking not only becomes dialectical. The theoretical speculative development of dialectic into a fully executed and enclosed domain, so note enclosed domain, is achieved by the work of Hegel, titled The Science of Logic. But then, perhaps the historical aspect.
Wait, hold on. Can you just read aloud, or Barnaby, can you read aloud this paragraph, just so people hear what Lauren is saying? Such a quiet little voice. That's a good voice. Okay, just starting with but. Yeah.
Okay. So he's talking about the appearance of the basic principles of thinking. But this appearance dissipates as soon as we notice what befell the history of Western thinking. Historiologically calculated, the incident lies nearly 1.5 centuries ago. The incident announced itself in that, through the efforts of the thinkers Fichte, Schelling and Hegel, and as prepared for by Kant, thinking was brought into another dimension of its possibilities, in certain respects its highest. Thinking knowingly becomes dialectical. The poetic ponderings of Hölderlin and Novalis likewise move about within the purview of this dialectic, and are even more excitedly roused by its unfathomed depths. The theoretical speculative development of the dialectic into a fully executed and enclosed domain is achieved in that work of Hegel's entitled The Science of Logic.
Okay.
I think that's the point I should read from the sign.
Okay.
Or his piece.
Yes. And so this
so
is.
people could hear.
Yeah.
I think it's,
I've got some quotes from Hegel.
yeah, just read it.
Don't worry, you're not being on a stage. It's being augmented.
So I'll read from it. It says,
Can you just say what that book is so that
this is an
people.
introduction to Hegel's logic by Justus Hartnack.
An introduction to Hegel's logic by Justin Hartnack.
Hartnack.
And who published it?
It's published by Hackett Publishing.
Okay. There you are.
Let's jump in there.
And page.
This is on page 22. I'm going to read it. He's actually talking about infinity, bad infinity, and true infinity. It's not important. I just want to get you to hear. There's one little reading here. So, true infinity is not, in contrast to bad infinity, a series that continues infinitely. continues infinitely in the same way as, for example, a straight line may continue infinitely. True infinity is comparable to a circle. There's an infinity where something implies to something else. With something else in turn, it seems to imply the very something by which it was implied. In order to see that this is so, it is necessary once more to examine the concept, all important for Hegel's philosophy of negation. Each something has to reiterate positive value and corresponding negative values. This involves each something being not only that which it is, but also that which it is not. If a something is, say, A, then to be A means to be that which is not non-A. However, if A is something, then that which is non-A, not non-A, must be something else. Therefore, something is both A and that which it is not non-A. And because it is not non-A, it is something else. It follows that something is identical with something else. Their identity conditions are interdefined. It's important to note that when we speak about A and non-A, then the class of non-A's include whatever belongs to the same class of things as A does. For example, if you go back to the example of colours, A is red, then non-A is the class of all other colours. Obviously, A is only red insofar as it cannot be said to be any other colour. Now let's jump to the next little piece where we hear what do we say? Where is it? So, identity and difference. So it's identity of difference on page 44, and it's now talking about essence. So it's just on chapter sort of in the logic. It says, whether a sentence of the form A is meaningful depends on the use of that sentence. In the preceding example, maybe I should start at the top, it is not always the case, I'll start again, it's not always the case, however, that sentences of the form A is an empty sentence. That is a sentence that should be classified and expressed in a formal or abstract identity. If a school teacher asks the pupil the question, what is a planet? And the pupil answers the question by saying a planet is a planet, then this answer could in no way be regarded as an answer. If the answer instead had been a planet is a celestial body orbiting around the Earth, it would have been an answer, albeit mistaken. Whether a sentence of the form A is meaningful depends on the use of that sentence. In the preceding example, when the sentence is used to answer a question about a planet, it is obviously misused. But suppose somebody is wondering why the Venus appears in the sky at one place in the evening and in another place in the morning. And someone else may well explain, well, Venus is a planet, and you know a planet is a planet, and therefore orbits the sun. Here the expression, a planet is a planet, is used as a reminder of what a planet is. In one of Doris Day's songs, she sang, for a guy is a guy wherever he is. And here again, on a charitable interpretation, the expression a guy is used as a reminder of some features of characterizing a guy. Nevertheless, Hegel's point is clear enough. What he says about the abstract or formal identity is a criticism of the so-called laws of thought. The first of the laws of thought he expresses as A equals A, and negatively as A cannot at the same time be A and not A. Such sentences or expressions cannot be possibly regarded or used as laws of thought. A equals A is a tautology. And from a tautology, nothing but tautologies follow. In contrast to abstract identity, concrete identity is protected from being silly by containing difference. As we've already seen, in essence, the unessential and essential, the immediate and mediating, are both identical and different, because essence is the truth of being. It is consequently also the truth of the immediate and of the unessential. In other words, concrete identity is an identity that contains or is only constituted by difference.
Okay, well, I'm going to stop you there because we want to go back.
I just wanted to hear.
I think that is. I think that
what goes on in Hegel's formulation.
Yes, but I think that and that's, I understand why you would put that in, but at this section, really what Heidegger is getting at is that there's an incident, and the incident isn't like a bomb being dropped on a hotel.
This coming into the history.
It's this coming into the history, and that's what it's the question of how difference and identity start to get formulated as the fabric as the material fabric of knowledge. And so kind of you're both right in a certain sense, or there's no wrong here. But the key is to understand what this word, how he's using incident. To not think, or how he's using material. He's not talking about Marxism, historical materialism, or like I was saying, a bomb being dropped somewhere. He's not talking about an incident in that sense, which is going to become, it's going to prefigure his notion of event.
In the glossary at the end of the book,
He is saying bombs.
no, incident has two German words, two references. One is Vorfall, and the other one is Vorkommnis. Now, I don't speak German, but
Why not?
for is something of like bursting, something putting in front. So Vorkommnis would be coming up to the front. It's an element of emerging,
Yeah.
of surfacing, and it seems to me Heidegger very often has this idea that things come towards us. Essence is coming to presence.
So the technology.
And the technology comes. Yeah, but that's sort of is a call. Is a bit, pulls us towards something. This is still not as grabbing. It's just coming to us.
My question was, if Hegel has identified the formulation A equals A as tautological, and Heidegger agrees, why did it make such a
Splash.
splash?
Because the question of negation is being, and therefore the way in which difference is developed, is what's at issue. Because Hegel's answer is that it's obviously not tautology, because of the way in which the notion of the negation comes into play. And it's a question of time, and a question of a certain kind of movement. Whereas for Heidegger, and this is why I wanted you to read these lectures, he steps away from his argument that being is time, and being in time. And he starts coming up with a different formulation, which allows for a form of the event, which is slightly more elaborate and more complicated than, well, it's a lot more elaborate and complicated than the incident, starts to present itself as the way in which one can negotiate what he considers a failing in Hegel, which isn't so much that A equals A, and that's a tautology, because Hegel's not saying that anyway, but that the way in which Hegel resolves it to talk about the negation and the contradiction as a totality as opposed to a dwelling and a calling. This is what Heidegger is going to charge.
Right, sort of oversimplified. So for Hegel, then the kind of the meat is in the A is the not A.
Is in the sublation.
Yeah, the not A is, sorry, then A does not equal not A. That's
A does not equal not A.
That's the interesting bit for Hegel.
Yeah.
Heidegger is far more, I mean, he's kind of wanting to tease out the movement.
Yes.
In the very idea of imposing an equation or an equivative state is what is.
Which is exactly what
is
Lawrence started out saying. You can't do that. You can't pose the position that you're going to take in a certain sense. It has to develop itself from the argument, or from the situation, or from the incident even. Diane, did you have a question? No. Okay.
It's very artistic as a process, or at least it lends itself.
Can you
to,
explain what you mean by that?
well, if the answer or the solution or the method cannot be posed a priori, cannot be posed as opposed to me as an object, but as to come out of the relation with the material or with language and logic and thought, then that's, for me, is precisely my way of working. I do not approach, or when I was working, I did not approach things with a preconceived idea, but it was in my relation with it that I could find ways to not much interpret it, but disorder it so much that it opened up to new interpretations.
Oh, perhaps this is the
Point
way
to
to
jump
go
in.
to this.
Yeah.
Okay, go on. Retrieving the seminar back from
Yeah, this is where he's, because you talk about referring to your work and in relation to this impending, he says, it pervades what is impending as an imposition.
Can you say where he says that?
Oh, this is page 78 to 79.
Okay.
So yeah, I'll start from this. It's but before we'll get to that bit. Just yeah, I mean, just he's contrasting like his historiological representation of history as a sequence. So he says, starting from here, on the basis of this present, the past is calculated, which this is in the historiological.
So say it again, louder.
Like with the historiological representation of history, where history is sequence, he's saying, starting from here as the basis of this present, the past is calculated. So it's this idea of measurable calculation. It's based on the principle of identity, where A is A in a specific way, a sort of flat way. But for it, the future is planned. So the historiological representation of history as a sequence of occurrences prevents us from experiencing to what extent authentic history is constantly and impending. So this is the contrast with what he wants to get at with the authentic event is this. How this is a constant is interesting, but the impending, this brings you to the impending. So then to get to the impending, he says, the impending is what waits towards us.
What does what to us?
It waits towards us, blah, blah, blah. That which waits towards us also comes to us. There's a lot of coming to it.
Very sexual man.
Steady.
That which
I told you, etche homosexual. You're all whores. Sorry.
So that which waits towards us comes to us. It is the future, rightly thought. It pervades what is impending as, and there's a lot. This as is sort of really getting more into the event. So it pervades what is impending as imposition, and this imposition, it's a really nice word, that approaches the Dasein.
The Dasein.
Dasein.
Okay, I didn't hear what you said.
Yeah. So it pervades what is impending as an imposition that approaches the Dasein of the human, seeming to him in one way or another, so that he would surmise the future in its domain. Oh, sorry, in its claim, sorry. Only the sense of claim there is really important. So, and then only in the air of such surmising does questioning thrive, the essential question of which belongs to the bringing forth. And so this bringing forth in relation to the impending is really important. So the bringing forth of every genuine work in any field whatsoever. So in relation to what you were just saying about work, I think this sense relates to the event in what we do when we work. But this idea of the imposition, sort of like this, I think it's in Deleuze, but when he's referring to someone else, where it comes up the idea of a theft in the thought process. It's quite nice to sort of relate the idea in terms of the process of thinking, how that.
What does that mean to have theft in the thought process?
Well, it's like this imposter. One imposes. So this the event. It's sort of, they're all kind of interconnected in an important way.
No, but what can
So
you?
it's from Greek, and when we did the fundamentals of concepts of the day.
I wasn't taking it from there.
No, but that's where it comes from. The Greek, according to Heidegger, he said that the Greeks had the notion of truth, which had to be stolen, and wrenched, literally. So I think that's where.
I know what you mean, but I mean, I'm agreeing with you, but I want it to be explained more so people can hear what is being stolen and how, who does the stealing, and how is the stealing happening.
I think it's like it relates to this the concealed and the unconcealed. So
But don't go down there yet. Let's just stay with the theft thing.
Well, it's how it's brought forth.
So, is the entity that's standing on the shore in relationship to Dasein stealing? What's doing the stealing, and what is being stolen?
We are.
Okay,
And philosophy.
close, yeah, but why does he claim that thought is stolen? What's,
Well,
You're so close to this.
The design is not necessarily a subject, is it? It's a collective subject, really.
okay,
it's
so
part of
what
a
gets
collective.
stolen?
Well, the same as an example is when you come to this table and a new person appears on the table, you take from, I think when you take
Careful,
from
Diane.
this side. No, it's this side as well. It's stealing from, it's all around. It's then sort of taking those truths that they're already stolen truths, as it were. That's in the same way that Deleuze and Guattari don't really...
Don't go there yet, just stick with Heidegger. You're so close.
It's this grasping and moving on, the initial run with it. If Hegel, then Heidegger, and then who us next? Move it on, but have to really wrench it from its, into viewing.
And so why is that considered theft and not, I don't know, evolving or revolution? Why, I mean, it's very
It's a
specific.
gift, it's a bestowal.
Okay, good, we're getting there, okay.
So one has to have ears for it, it's like the fundamental
You must have attunement, yes.
Yeah.
Mhm. But why do you have to have ears for the stealing, not hands? Why does it become more acoustic in that sense? Why is it attunement?
Well, he says use the word obedience to it actually, as if it's something that overpowers. But, I don't really like that distinction between the acoustic and the visual, because I think the visual can be just as sort of entangled as the acoustic. It doesn't
Yeah,
have to
but
be-
acoustic not in the sense of musical, acoustic in the sense of attunement. So the visual is acoustic. It's not visual meaning representation, and acoustic meaning language or hearing. It's acoustic is the non-representational form of the visual. It is still visual. It's like the ear of the other in Derrida. Well, but let's not go to Derrida.
It's the techno, isn't it? It's the techno. It means the dictionary, Heidegger dictionary means not making arguments, but wisdom, knowing that guides our dealing with the physics. How did you say that? Physis, Greek.
Physis, yeah.
Physis, yeah. And then the technotypes, the possessors, trying how to reveal being. So if it's like Socrates and Plato, Socrates didn't write anything down. Plato then comes along and writes his thoughts down against probably against his wishes. I don't know how the story runs, but so that's the stealing kind of thing, and then the writing is then stolen and passes on.
Okay, we're getting
Just
very
for the
warm,
stolen-
very warm
Stolen
here.
could also, sort of, that's what where it's sort of negation rather than an affirmation, because it's sort of differences of differences. It's sort of taking you back into a sort of a negative. The difference is negative, possibly.
Okay, can you just re-summarize where you've gotten from your line 1? From the very beginning, just so we get to where we got to with the thieving business. So we have incident. Can you summarize that a little bit so far?
Well, he's put out the sort of the commonly thought of understandings of the laws of thought and principles of thinking, and then he's going to sort of rupture that by saying there's this incident with a dialectic, and he's going to introduce a different sense of the historical or an event through this impending. Oh, sorry.
No, you're good, you're doing good, you're doing good.
What I lost is because the theft is not in the paragraph we were reading, and yet you placed it right here.
Well, these are the bits that I sort of pull out as critical in terms of how I want to pin it together, rather than
No,
like
it's
reading
fine. I
it
just was
out.
trying to
Okay.
understand what the theft moves with the.
I can give you the page numbers wherever for any bit that I'm quoting. We're all, at the moment, we're still at really this 78, 79 bit.
So forget about theft for the moment, but you're very warm about this theft thing. So just let it hover, I guess, for the moment.
He wants to sort of leave behind the historical as this, or he wants to distinguish the sort of the historical, the representation of history that relates to sort of the common sense thinking of like past is behind, but present is here, and the future is there, and get at a different sense of event that is in process when one is thinking, or so he.
And that's a different form of, let's say, authority or legitimacy, this theft.
Yeah, this is what brings forth. So this is like a radical new,
Which is important for your work.
Oh,
sorry.
I really want to understand. So nice.
Who's
You're
like
being great. Who's like
When did you do the next one?
I don't understand this. I don't know. I understood when I read this. He separates out a kind of a historiological notion of history,
And
which recedes, and then there's a different kind of historicity which only happens in the future, or also happens in the future, which is sort of I imagine was related to the event, but I don't understand why. I don't understand the notion of theft and hearing. Why
Let's
it's in here.
let's lay that to the one side at the moment, because we're so early, and you're not wrong. In fact, you're quite targeting how this would come in, but the argument hasn't been developed yet. So let's get the argument out on the table, like you're doing.
So must the bringing forth of the work for its part listen ahead. When one is accustomed to call in productive and ingenious character of work, we covered that bit. So I've got authentic history is an impending, and then in brackets that seems to relate to becoming. What impends is the future as the imposition of the inceptual. So this is where he's sort of relating it to thinking, I suppose. So i.e. what is always enduring essence in, as well as its concealed gathering. Impending is also a concern for the approach and claim of what has been. So the claim of has been.
The claim of has been. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean that's sort of stolen. It sort of comes from as it becomes an event, whereas the past precedes. He's discussed this a bit. History brings nothing new. There is nothing new under the sun. Those two. He sort of contrasts those two sort of common expressions. But I don't want to go too much into that now.
Can I hear that again?
Sorry?
Can I hear that point again?
Which part?
What you said.
That history recedes.
I added a bit there. What impends is the future. This is him. What impends is the future as the imposition of the inceptual, i.e. what is always enduring, essence in, as well as its concealed gathering. And this is on page 29. Impending is also the concern for the approach and claim of what has been. It's further on.
He says, what you're quoting here is where he says, authentic history is an impending. What impends is the future as the imposition of the inceptual, that is to say, of what is already enduring, essencing, as well as its concealed gathering. Impending is also the concernfully approaching claim of what has been. When one says that basically history brings nothing new, then this expression is untrue, provided it means that there would always only be the ever-same monotony. If, however, the statement "there is nothing new under the sun" says this, there is only what is old in the inexhaustible transformational violence of the inceptual, then the sentence hits upon the essence of history. So, do you want to translate that?
Well, I don't know if I can translate
No.
it all, but I noticed that impending in our wonderful glossary at the end is translated, is the translation of the German composed name noun Gegenwart.
Gegenwart.
Gegenwart is either impending with hyphen, but Gegenwart, one word, is the present. So there is something there that is quite important, I believe.
Yeah, that doesn't get translated in English.
This is lost in English. Because if authentic history is an impending, Wart is guarding, and Gegen is upon. So authentic history is some sort of being attentive, being present, presencing to the present. Presencing, something like that. It's being awake, it's being alert, it's being receptive.
Okay, we're going to call Barnaby and his voice of clarity here to read, if you don't mind, the authentic history paragraph, which ends at the essence of history. Just
It was a brain of clarity. Starting with authentic history is...
And listen to it as carefully as you can, so that, because what Lauren is saying here, Lauren stroke Martin, is the way in which there's both the new comes up and then the notion that there's nothing new. There is only, mankind or human history or whatever. There is nothing new to be found. This relation between the new and the not new, but it's not a dialectical relationship. You want to go with it?
Authentic history is an impending.
Okay, stop. What does that mean, impending? How is it that something is impending?
Well, this is pretty something.
It means it's coming.
And that it's coming and will probably come is therefore what makes it authentic.
It's already here, but it's coming.
Well,
In some sense.
it's not already here.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
coming.
yeah.
But the point is that it could be coming. Let's say it's going to rain. I mean, this is a horrible example, but I'm going to use it anyway. We can say that the weather is approaching, that the rain is coming. Therefore, that claim is an authentic claim. If you can see, rain clouds on the horizon, and that the logic is such that the next step will be that it's here. So what makes something authentic from the point of view of Heidegger, even though he then brings it into a racialized argument later on, but anyway, this moment in the discussion, what he's saying is what is authentic is that which can emerge as that which it was promising it would be. So it's going to rain, and then it rains. So you can authentically say, it looks like it's going to rain, because given X, Y, and Z, that's what's going to happen. So he's saying authentic history is an impending. That's what makes it authentic. That it is clearly, probabilistically, I'm using the word, going to happen. And that's the authenticity of it. That's the authority of it, to use your concern. Okay, now.
Does that
Yes.
only happen looking in the future then? It's never in the present?
No,
The
the authenticity is in the present. What isn't in the present is that it's already here, because it's not here, it's impending.
There's an example. Last night I was watching a documentary on YouTube about the band Crass. It's called "There Is No Authority But Yourself," and one of the members was talking about some information. They were talking about the network they had. This was in the 80s, before the internet, and they'd received information from a soldier serving in the Falklands War about the targeting of the Belgrano and the Sheffield. Well, actually, the targeting of the Sheffield as a kind of drawing away from ships carrying members of the royal family, and that the Sheffield, when it was hit by a missile, was kind of like if they sink this one, then nobody royal dies. And this was, as you'd imagine, covered up by the authorities, and so they received this, if you like, authentic history. And they started to, the members of in Crass started to form a dissemination program where they disseminated this this authentic history in a very creative manner. Effectively, they made an audio tape, a fictitious audio tape, which they then distributed to European newspapers, and sat back and saw what happened. So this kind of concretizes what Heidegger is trying to say, because there's this sort of sense that the official history, which was suppressed or was formalised and was intended to recede into the past, was then separated, or Crass separated out via this kind of source, this military source, the authentic history, and then the authentic history became, through their dissemination of it, part of a kind of an impending.
Right.
And you know, it did come to pass that the European newspapers suddenly picked up, and there was a kind of, I mean, it's too complicated, or not too complicated, too long to go into in this classroom, but I urge anybody to watch the film. It's an interesting film. But he discussed what happened when eventually the European newspapers didn't necessarily pick up, but the CIA and the KGB did pick up on this audio
Because
tape.
the audio tape just slice Thatcher and Reagan.
That's right. That's right. That's. Have you seen the film?
Probably.
Yeah.
I can sing you the lyrics if you like.
What, the whole film? It's an hour and 4 minutes long.
No, the lyrics are crap. I can
Right.
sing
Yeah.
most
It's
of the
called,
lyrics.
the film is called There Is No Authority But Yourself.
But, okay,
It isn't
yes.
so much as in, authentic doesn't have to do with the notion of truth of daily life.
Of the bomb falling on your head.
Yes.
Yes.
Or of perception, or is it true what I have not perceived but might have happened in the other room? It's not that. Authentic is a different mode in Heidegger, I think.
Can you elaborate on that?
That's why this is one of the many exits he takes from modern thought, modernizing between Kant and Hegel. What becomes much clearer in the third lecture here, which is then taken there,
Yes,
in
but don't
principle
jump
identity,
into it too much.
it is simply that the subject-object cannot be thought as separated or as pre-existing that relation. So what is authentic is being able to feel in tune with these relations, which always comes in sideways somehow. So there is something that has been covered. Probably the theft, I sort of missed the theft element. It's why I was so keen on finding out where it was.
We'll get there, I mean, yeah.
But there must be something of it in time to get what, because the object or being, the infinitive, the undeterminated existence, which we participate of as in historical small beings, is not in front of us with a nice clear line in between. That's what was the problem of the pseudo that he didn't want to follow in Hegel. Is this trying to hear and not quite hearing, but knowing that trying to be attuned with it is the position one should be in.
Right, okay,
He
yeah.
says the alert obedience to history, and obedience that rests in pure freedom, being able to hear. Is that what it seems to be?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
Really,
And there's where attunement comes in that sense. Hearing, but not in the necessarily, the division between visual and,
But we are moving in relation to it rather than other way around.
no, it's entirely reciprocal.
So, sorry?
And it's entirely reciprocal.
It's reciprocal.
Absolutely.
So the history that waits for us in the future, I mean, he says it's waiting.
yeah.
I mean, that implies that it's, that there's, I mean, I'm still seeing this as a kind of linear time type thing, even though there's kind of jumps along the line from history.
No, it's not in
I mean, I
entirely
think
in terms
perhaps
of that
thinking about
in these simultaneous reciprocal interaction between the infinitive and the present being, the historical beings, in this presence that is a coming to presence, or the essencing he uses all the time, if we have to follow these translations, this is the event which he calls it the event in tandem, is the event that keeps on going, keeps on moving. There's one event, is that the world comes to light.
Oh, this is the way.
Yeah, can you read that? Yeah.
It says, the essence of history as the arrival of what has been. So that's what's right. I mean, I've broken that sentence there in between. So this is on 79 to 80. The essence of history, it's key to get this idea. The essence of history as the arrival of what has been. It is this what is already essencing, and only this that comes to us. The past, however, recedes from us.
Okay, don't go for that. Let's have Barnaby in his slow read the same thing that you're saying, because what you're saying is absolutely the point here. Barnaby?
Right, starting from
Authentic history.
authentic history is an impending. What impends is the future as the imposition of the inceptual, i.e. of what is already enduring, essencing as well as its concealed gathering. Impending is also the concernfully approaching claim of what has been. When one says that, basically, history brings nothing new, then this expression is untrue, provided it means that there would always only be the ever-same monotony. If, however, the statement, "there is nothing new under the sun," says this, there is only what is old in the inexhaustible, transformational violence of the inceptual, then the sentence hits upon the essence of history. It is the arrival of what has been. It is this, what is already essencing, and only this that comes to us. The past, however, recedes from us.
Okay. You want to comment on that? Because this is the crucial. Dane, did you want to say something on this?
Is it, when you said the past is essencing in the present, you mean that you don't get the past in this present, you don't literally grasp the past, it's got no substance in it, but the essence of the past is always filtered into the present, it's always
Yes.
grasp, gather from the past from sources or from history, culture, in those sorts of things.
And that
into the
which
present.
throws itself up like a tsunami onto the present. The tsunami itself recedes, and what's left is just the vomit.
Yeah.
Is this a bit of Bergson coming through?
It's a bit of Heidegger coming through. Bergson still, I think.
Okay.
I mean, Heidegger's been developing this forever.
Okay.
But you're right when you quote Bergson, because
I think it's what I meant by that is because obviously Bergson came before Heidegger, but Heidegger, it's this theft thing. Heidegger says better what Bergson had invented,
Yeah. Okay.
and as a
Yeah.
result invents it anew.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
Which
something
is,
like that.
which is exactly Heidegger.
It's
Saying
exactly
that
Heidegger.
to say it better, but therefore inventing anew is exactly what he's doing.
And that's the theft.
Because his process of developing the argument is constantly stating something, and then explaining it in such a way that at a certain point he revisits stating it exactly in the same way, but that doesn't make sense. It has acquired dimensions. You started off with the introduction of introducing yourself by name is honorable. And yes, it could be a sort of little stratagem, but at the same time, it recurs here in a much more intense way.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we think of this last sentence, if we say there is nothing new under the sun, it says this, there is only what is old in the inexhaustible transformation, but it is the arrival of what has been. So it was already stated by Bergson, the arrival of what has been.
And where was it stated by Bergson? Just for the clarity?
Well, in this case, I was thinking of time and simultaneity. There is a very good critique of specialized version of time, where he thinks that there is a line between past and future, and then a hand that slides in between, and the present acts as a screen in between the past and the future, a mobile screen along this line. And he criticized that notion of temporality of time. And here is the same. There isn't a chronological history put in that. Obviously, it's there, but it's trivial. What is concerned with is the constant emerging of an energy, which could be the land developer song, that makes the present present. The present is presenting itself, sorry. As in, instead of going somewhere, being surfing on the top of a fountain, opens up in all these directions. It's the continuous event. The event on top is physical.
And is that what you would be saying is the translation mark? Is that making sense to you?
I just lost at the end point. I just lost track of it.
So,
Drifted off.
okay, so go back to what you, but did everybody hear what?
It was making sense what you said.
Yeah. What about for people that are silent?
I was just wanted to say to point out the essence in, it's in the footnote in here, you can look it up if you need to.
In the, yeah.
Essence in, it really has the meaning of prevailing. Has the meaning of prevailing.
Yeah.
Essence in, I think people get confused about that.
As opposed to substance.
The essence
Yeah,
of something in the normal columns of
Yeah.
language.
In fact, what's nice about that is that essence comes alive as something that's not predetermined. It's not something like a DNA in that sense. And that's kind of interesting.
But when you say this, it's because it's easy to say, because then sometimes it is written music. When he says, well, who am I? Well, I am the one who asked the question, who am I?
Slap him. Anyway. Yes.
Well, maybe yes, maybe not, but then it seems a bit too simplified.
Say again?
Right.
At a certain point, it seems that what he's getting at is, if you want to boil it down to a very simple thing, is that when he asked the question, what is man? Unfortunately, keeps using man. Or what is the historical individual? Well, is that form of being that asks the question, what is the historical individual?
That's the question that Sartre in Bad Faith and Authenticity, which is another version of authenticity. Sartre said, what am I, a being which is not its own foundation? There is a restlessness, a appeal to consciousness, a feeling of guilt. The intuition of our contingency is not identical with the feeling of guilt. Nevertheless, it is true that our own apprehension of ourselves, we appear to ourselves as having the character of an unjustifiable act, which is his take on the inauthenticity that Heidegger's, because it is facticity, one of the existential.
It's Sartre's criticism.
That's Sartre, but it says here, this is from, it's not necessarily very strong, but it's Heidegger and Sartre were the first to use this term facticity to indicate both the factual condition of consciousness and the malediction of inauthenticity. This is, in this context, it seems appropriate to use this expression for Hegel's catastrophe of factual consciousness, both the factual state of self-awareness. I know that myself was in a condition of deception in which I failed to justify my character. So there's that sense of the impending as being a more authentic understanding of
what is.
The world, the face.
But where Sartre is going to develop that into an existential, argument, Heidegger is going to develop it into the question of how one understands event, which is going to be a totally different move. I mean, there might be a bit of a crossover there, intersection there, but just
the notion of facticity is one of Heidegger's existentials, thrown in as projection, facticity, all those things. But facticity is very important in being in time. So, and just when Matthew said it, I had the word in front of me, I thought I'd use it.
interesting point.
So then there is a very strong echo of the phenomenological move Heidegger comes from. Yeah,
Echo, yeah, no, I just
so that the essence of something is not deep inside.
That's
but
right.
It's precisely the behavior of that thing.
It's the surface of it.
It's the surface of it, yes.
To the degree to which a behavior creates a terrain
Yeah.
or an imminent plane.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's what you were going to say, wasn't it?
Okay. Stolen.
That's right, stolen once again. Now you can now retrieve back that
I'm
somewhere.
very, very slowly. Everybody else.
No, you're doing fine.
Before we go into the next bit, he sort of like jumps a bit and he concentrates on the idea of sort of rules in relation to dimension. So I thought this was interesting. So, like he says.
And what page are you on?
Still on page 80. So yeah, he discusses dimension and rules. So he gives the example of how a plane is generated from a line. He says if we put aside the spatial restriction
whether dimension shows itself as, again, the domain of the rule. So, and thus rules and domains are not two distinct or separate things, but rather one and the same. This was interesting to relate to Delander's sort of, where he speaks of possibility spaces, this idea of rules as not separate from dimensions, but that's something else, but just mention that. So then he wants to look at this rules in relation to the dialectic, and well, rules, but also because we're talking about the laws of thought.
And so a rule, I mean, just to drive that point home, as it were, a rule, as you're suggesting Heidegger's bring forward, needs to be understood both temporally, by which one means discontinuous, and spatially, by which one means dimensionality.
Yeah, giving rise to a dimension that wasn't there before.
So that's important. So the notion of a rule and how something takes on itself as a rule actually prefigures the argument that Lyotard puts forward in Discourse Figure. Because Discourse Figure, his argument, as you remember from last semester's torture, is the relationship between the way in which the discursive and the kind of convergence of the image, as it were, that is to say, figural in the lay sense, come to create something that escapes a semiotic rendition, right? And so what you're suggesting here, or what Lyotard is conceivably taking from this little bit here, is the way in which a rule, in order for it to stick or have some form of authority, has to invoke both the inceptual and the impending conceptual, that is to say, the authenticity of the historical, which is a plane, or an imminent plane, and at the same time, the way in which it makes itself present, the kind of figural. Are you saying because you agree, or because you want to get to the next point? It's all very interesting, anyway.
So it's precisely the notion of event.
Yes.
Because the event, again, sticking to the glossary, the glossary is really good in this book. No, because it explains much. You can't really understand what
you don't talk we just read the glossary.
That's right. That's right.
It's the event is the word rightness, but
yes.
I'm just saying anything. Can I supposed to be present?
It's all right. It's right. They're all presented together.
But the rightnen, as also as a verb, is to appropriate and to take place. But then to take place, to take space and make it, to take space
Your theft.
and take place.
That's your theft, right? To take the place, right? Is that right?
I wasn't quite up to speed with everybody else. But yeah, that's an important word, that one.
And so the event is the rule that rules the place. It gives it dimensions.
Yes.
And
This is
vice
so
versa.
important. This is how it's not a layering in the sense of a chocolate cake layering.
No, it's an expanding
or
of
Husserl in the sense of sedimentation. It's something that's happening both temporally and spatially.
To give an
Oh, you
example.
can't say anymore.
Could
There's
you
more.
repeat that about happening both temporally and spatially?
I wanted to sort of get this rule making in what is saying in relation to it in the dialectics and getting contradiction on the table, and everybody's brushing their head.
It's very painful.
Sorry.
Okay.
No, sorry.
No, it's okay. Basically what I'm saying, what I was trying to make sure one heard, is the way in which you have the question. Husserl puts out a very long and complicated discussion, which I'm now truncating and destroying by calling it just sedimentation. But he has this argument around layering of history and the way in which things present themselves in this kind of almost like a geological notation, which Delande actually takes from, but anyway. And Heidegger is attacking his father by saying that those layerings have to be understood in terms of an immanent plane. You can think of layer, but don't think of it like a chocolate cake, or don't think of it like a genealogical, pardon me, like a geological, thank you. So many ways in which I mispronounce things. But anyway, divisions, but think in terms of these structures that don't have edges, so dimensions, planes, time that is not going to be a chronological time, it's going to be an aeon time. So is that okay? Can you want to jump in now?
Okay.
Did you get that?
That's great.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, now we're going to go back to summary.
Oh, what was right, I'm not quite sure what was now. By becoming dialectical. Oh yeah, so after the rule thing, right, by becoming dialectical, thinking reaches a previously closed off domain of a rule.
So he's saying there is some merit to dialectics.
Is that the question?
No, it's just what
Well,
to read
it's
the thing,
one
because it brings what I was going to say. By becoming dialectical, thinking reaches a previously closed off domain of a rule for the delineation of its own essence. Through dialectics, thinking reaches a domain in which it is able to think itself completely. So this idea, so this is what's key here, trying to get how he means this, to think itself completely. Like in what way does it think itself in terms of this A is A or A is not A, or the thinking of thinking itself as opposed to what is thought with it, and whether it's sort of like A is complete. I don't know. But then in this bit, with the dimension of the dialectic, it becomes evident in a founded manner that and how there belongs to thinking not only the possibility, but the necessity of thinking itself. So, and so here I take the reference to thinking the necessity of thinking itself is more like the necessity of, you could substitute processing, possibly. So the necessity of thinking itself, of mirroring itself in itself, of reflecting. But this is the problem of dialectics in this sort of, it's still trapped in this sort of reflective mode. But on the other hand, what's interesting is like drawing our attention to the thinking as this sort of processual kind of event.
So he's basically saying there is something positive about something useful, as it were, about dialectics, because it actually retrieves the fact, it is able to, not maybe retrieve is the wrong word, it's able to highlight a way in which thinking can present itself as complete.
But in the dimension of dialectic, it comes to light entirely for the first time. That's a bit arrogant. Why and in which...
It's all a bit arrogant, but anyway, it is Heidegger after all.
Why and in which way thinking is reflection. And then now we're getting more to the...
Congratulations, wow, page 2.
We sort of did the history in the West. We did the
history of the West,
and the Western European thinking. We got to the present, that issue of the present. I think. So maybe we jump over that bit because we really want to get down here where with dialectics we have transformed the forms of the principle of thinking. So he's taking. Okay.
And how have we transformed? How does he think we've transformed it?
This is probably the answer. Hegel, however, shows that this statement. Page 81.
Yeah, it's bottom of the page.
This statement A is A, not even posit what it posits. if it had not already breached the empty sameness of A with itself, and set A at the very least against itself, against A. So this idea of breaching is like, that's the key argument to how he sort of says, like, it's not
wrong.
Yeah, that law of thought where A was A, the common sense A, the common sense way of understanding A is A, is like with Hegel, he's got the contradiction. Well, initially he was saying, Heidegger was initially saying the A is A aspect. Actually, there was contradiction going on there within that, and then here he's showing you how Hegel worked out that there was contradiction going on in that A is A bit, because to have A is A, you already have to have the A breached by the not A against itself. So, or maybe it helps to just read it right. The proposition could not even be a proposition, because the key aspect being problematized here is proposition. So the proposition could not even be a proposition, i.e. something invariably compound, if it had not first abandoned what it appears to posit, namely A as a completely empty sameness, and thus as a sameness of something with itself that is never capable of further unfolding, i.e. A as identity, and indeed as abstract identity. So
Can you repeat that?
So the proposition could not even be a proposition, i.e. something invariably, unchangingly compound, if it had not first abandoned what it appears to posit, like broken its boundaries, namely A as a completely empty sameness, and thus as a sameness of something with itself. Sorry, I'm not frozen.
That's right, you're doing that.
So
What's the problem here? I mean, for those of you that, like Diane, for example, how many times have you heard this before? Never.
Never.
Right? Grace, how many times have you heard this before? Never. Okay, I would say probably about 5 of you here that have never heard this before. So what does it actually mean to say, what is this issue here? What is this burning issue? They keep saying A equals A, and then A doesn't equal A, and then what the heck about, forget about the A's, like go to B. What is the issue here? Why is there a problem? Why are people like losing their shirt over this?
I don't think it's a problem. I think it's really obvious what he's saying. So I think
Okay,
this
just
really,
don't ignore
really
him at the end of the table. Okay, that's right. And what is it?
It's simply that if you once you start stretching, the A is identity, but until you stretch it out into an equation, you can't see. You've got to try and imagine that you're inside that character, but you don't know you're inside something until you stretch it out. And this is effectively what he's arguing, is like saying, well, the whole conflation of time and space is this equation, is stretching it out so that we can actually view identity from some kind of distance, either temporal or spatial. But in the viewing, which we're viewing from the equal sign, that sort of represents some kind of element of proximity, spatial or temporal, but it has implications in terms of finitude. Once you're outside and you're looking at the kind of architecture of the character, if you like, the character of the A, then you start to have to consider that. So in other words, you have to start to consider things which you simply weren't able to consider when you were within that A. And I think that his, he's...
Except you can't step outside the A. There's nothing above. There's no audience to A.
Well, you're the own audience. Debatably, I mean, this is it's not simple. It's not. There isn't a pure and smooth exchange of kind of concept as would normally be anticipated with the insertion of the equal sign. because it is problematic once you've got this time, space, distance. You know, this kind of lack of interiority stretching out. You know.
So are you suggesting that the A is kind of like this melting thing, that if it's here, then that's one thing, but then if it starts to stretch out and then it starts to envelop you and get your feet wet?
I think I think that the problem is with the spectre of equivalence.
Okay.
The equal sign is a really very damaged transport.
Okay, very good. So to translate that a little bit further, so in fact, you're not saying like here, let's say Jean-Paul here is the A, and then it starts to melt and it gets all over your feet and it's all sticky, and now you're in the A. He's not saying that. When you talk about the stretched A,
No.
he's not saying that the A keeps stretching until finally the you that was out there looking at the A is now in the A, right? He's not saying that.
Who isn't? Heidegger.
Heidegger.
I think he's saying that I think he's recognising that there is a problem that there is this notion of distance inserted by the equal sign, which possibly hadn't been considered by Hegel, who maybe went on to kind of formulate through his not A is not what is not A. Sorry, what was the second part of the equation? But he got kind of that where there was this sort of. I mean, what Hegel was kind of interested in was the sort of immaculacy of the whole thing. He wasn't interested in the two things. The two things. You don't think that's right?
Can we read this quote by Hegel? This is the key. This is I can get help and then the thing.
Okay, go on. Go on.
Because he picks out this quote of Hegel. He says it's the catchy one. He says, but the life, because it's got life and death in it, but so.
What page is it on?
Page 82.
Okay.
So he picks out two quotes to get at this from Hegel. So this is the second one. But the life of the spirit is not the life that shrinks from death and keeps itself untouched by devastation, but rather the life that endures it and maintains itself in it. It, spirit, wins its truth only when in utter dismemberment, and then it's i.e. in contradiction, it finds itself. So the formula here is working differently to the formulas in the principles of thought we set out with a common way of understanding them. But it doesn't get us out of the trap because it's putting it back. At the end of it, the contradiction is putting it back at a finding of itself.
You're only allowed to say something if, in fact, it's going to clarify what Lauren just said. You're
Yes.
going to raise another issue.
The contradiction that Lauren just said really emerges here is the abyss Heidegger speaks about, which he says he is not opening up, he is already in a metaphysical mode of thinking. Because all the, from, if I think you go, and that's uncertainty, all the way up to the spirit recognizing itself through all this dismemberment, and all the way down to through all the biological processes that make you go, there is space in between each bit and the next, and then you look inside and there is more space. So there is always this void that to Heidegger, the dialectic cannot solve. So the abyss is already there. It's not just there is a cliff at the abyss. It's completely permeating us. And
Okay, so that's what the notion of discontinuity is.
yeah, and he said, well, my solution instead is to...
You're clapping because you understand.
No. Just clapping.
Just clapping.
Using my mind.
Yeah, as you do.
And instead, there's when that introduces the leaf that says, the abandon this from something entirely different. And indeed, in the other lecture, he says this is not opposite. It's even more. It's different.
No, you can't speak yet. Grace, what are you hearing?
Nothing!
Just air!
Voices.
Is that right?
Yeah,
It's
just
just,
over my head today.
I'm failing.
you're not failing, you're not failing. No, don't go there. You can all go there together. You can go there by yourself. Dane, what are you hearing?
Well, with the A.
Nothing!
Well, with the A equals A, you know, the A can't get to the A unless it's face to face with it. Like, I can't deal with something in the world unless I'm face to face in the world dealing with it, not just thinking about it, because I'm just thinking about it and not really dealing with it, not there with it. I can't deal with it in that sort of sense.
So,
Thinking it's abstract, it's just taking errors.
so that A is like going to go into a little like sort of kangaroo boxing with the other A.
It's going to get dirty.
Going to get dirty, and those two A's are going to then create identities. Is that what you're thinking?
I
It's
think-
wrong.
I
No, but it was a very good visualization. I
But the
felt.
dirtiness, though, it makes a lot of sense
Okay.
to me, because what is very strong here is that move that started probably with Ursula and other characters just before Heidegger, of moving away from the idealized model of the universe that was in place since Newton.
Okay.
The
That's
idea
true.
that beyond all the funny shapes a bit consumed, a bit worn out in different nuances, there is a pure geometry where every shape or every concept is in its pure form. That was what science aimed at and always referred to and accepted that physics would be a bit rough, but mathematics would be perfect instead. So is it not Heidegger that said mathematics is the new form of metaphysics? You said 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So, and instead here, and this is still present in Hegel, this is why there is nothing left out. While here he says, well, this is not working, you're already in it, you're dirty. You can't think of even retracing to such a pure state.
Mhm.
So you've got to deal in different terms with it.
So then the notion of authenticity doesn't mean pure.
No.
What does it mean?
Precisely the opposite.
It means.
It means to feel, and I say feel and not think because here is making already a difference, that one is thrown in the world. One starts by being thrown in the middle of things. Is born one day at a certain hour with that weather, with the political situation, the economic situation, the mother is blonde, whatever, and that's all it is.
The
And
mother is
then-
blonde?
No, these days, there is no hierarchy from the
Right,
supreme
right.
being. And that all details and bigger, smaller dimensions are all mixed together in a specific moment.
Right.
And then with that, there is also some a level of individuality. It's not saying that the individual is completely erased, but it's not a solid boundary. It's the individual has its own vector, its own direction. It's called a project in Liga time. And then there is the history of all the rest around it. And if one is sort of navigating through it, constantly responding to it, and having it responding to one.
So are you then suggesting, following what Dane was saying, is that if you say A equals A, the problem with that, as Hegel is being criticized, is that it doesn't take into consideration the fact that the plane, the intersection between the plane of existence and the temporal existence, the spatial plane, the plane of immanence, and the temporal plane, emits, E-M-I-T-S, or admits, like says that this is what happens, a discontinuity, an abyss, that is not a break somehow, a rupture somehow, that taken together is what creates the identity, not the fact that it's linked between the kangaroo boxing between A and A. Is that what you're saying?
Sorry, I lost you on for it.
Oh, sorry.
What is the identity is the relation.
Identity is the relation.
Is the relation, but belonging to the relation. But A equal A is the problem of metaphysics that has split the relation into fixed terms.
Right, and why is that the problem?
Because it assumes that there are pure moments, what we were calling endpoints last week. A equals A, I fitting into the wider scheme of history, the two rays, for example, or I being supposed to be a certain kind of individual behaving in a certain way because it can be something and then not others. That equivalence, that formula, that economic formula is criticizing because by pretending to be exhaustive, it leaves out much more on one hand, and at the same time, it blocks things.
And what's the things that it's blocking?
It is blocking. Well, here is what it is more debatable. It's blocking. To Heidegger, it is blocking the authentic relationship of the individual,
Of the impending.
To being as the indeterminate. Is blocking what he thinks is a better way of existing in the world.
And is that what you thought was the obvious point that was being made?
No.
Yes, so restate your obvious point.
Okay, I'm going to restate my obvious point in a really cheap way.
Okay, oh
I
my
mean,
God.
I think that
Say it with love.
first of all, to understand the A versus A, it's worth considering what the alternative is, and I think the alternative is A.
God, don't you just love philosophy?
This is all within this is all still arguing within the metaphysics of Hegel. We're all still arguing that A equals A is A. This is the metaphysics.
Okay,
so in the fifth, as I said, when 2 weeks ago, I said, remember in the introduction to the fifth principle of what is metaphysics, Heidegger says, to get out of metaphysics, which is what he's talking about Hegel, to get beyond it, to remember being. Doesn't mean to abandon metaphysics. He says, as long as man is still the rational animal, there is metaphysics. But he's kind of saying that there's more to thinking and thought than that. I don't really want to say process, rather than process.
Or method.
Yeah.
But let's keep that, let's park that and say, yes, we're not getting out of metaphysics in this kind of, that was then and this is now sort of way. But let's go back to your A.
Yeah, so could I take my cheap shot?
Yeah, take your cheap shot.
The A equals A and setting up identity, I think it's a sort of popular notion because, I can see it, if you take like a fetus, the fetus has no consciousness of itself. It doesn't matter that it's in a sort of pre-originary state, and it's only once it has distance from its host, from her host, that then she starts to recognise that she's not the host. That I think that's a process which takes quite a long time, but this distance, and that's the equal sign. That's the equal sign in the A versus A. Establishes. This is effectively trying to explain this kind of call. I don't think that Heidegger or Hegel is just kind of making it sort of simple, and as I'm aware I'm reducing it quite a lot. But I feel that is kind of where this sort of strikes a chord. Not necessarily with me, but and although I've used an example of a fetus and a mother, where one has a kind of restricted consciousness anyway, I think that it equally applies to other kind of models of subsumation. I just can't think of any at the time.
Cheap shot remains.
Yeah.
Grace, what are you hearing now?
Nothing. Literally just that the equal sign is the distance between A and A, but that's...
But why do you think, forget about everything else you've heard so far. Okay, what is it that seems to be the problem here? Why is this a problem?
Because those are always in representation, I think.
Because why?
Because if we stay within metaphysics, we're always going back to representation.
And what's wrong with that?
It doesn't allow for the is, which is the present thing.
Okay, and in your work, how would that...
I
Sorry, I don't have any work. Spoken like a true PhD student. I don't even know what my project is. Right, okay. Let's give it one more kick at the can. Samira, you want to try? No. A small little voice. Almost, come on, one little tiny attempt. You can't be any worse than anybody else's on the table.
I kind of forgot what I read before. I think that's a different way of are unique. We have different way of existence, different experience. That's why everyone says something.
So, in other words, if you have this method, it's a way of bringing in totally different ways of thinking as a principle of thought. Very good. See, that wasn't such a tragedy, was it? And that the A equals A won't allow that difference to show itself. And that's what the problem is. And so all this toing and froing about dimension and time and blah, blah, blah is meant to get us back to the basic question of how does I'm going to use the word individuality, but by that I don't mean someone removed from the social, but the uniqueness, that which is called entities, show themselves and therefore have an identity, other than the identity itself just being man or, you know, species or being. And that's what he's trying to get at. Not so bad. Didn't do so bad for a first outing on the table. Very good. You're next. Okay, just want to mention that. Be prepared. Okay. Okay, you want to go back? It's snowing.
Yeah,
Oops.
it's fine.
Yay! I love the snow. Sorry. Yeah, I'm the only one here.
Well, we could go on to the next. He asks in question 5 and 4.
What do you mean, the question?
Well, his fourth and fifth sort of questions.
Oh, I see, right,
leading
okay.
in to things. We sort of, well, we sort of he's introduced Hegel. He's now going to sort of compare sort of. He makes an interesting comparison between the sort of dialectical materialism, sort of contrasting sort of Hegel's move, like scientific method and the dialectic method, sort of in Hegel. He sort of contrasts those as the reverse of, I don't want to say it's the reverse of each other. This would be page 84. I didn't, but it said leading to when he I mean, so earlier on in the book, when he referred.
Here.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So this like it's well, is it so because he often quite refers to this atomic energy, sort of this taking this kind of like this act of how nature has become a sort of has been sort of put into standing reserve in the rising of atomic energy. This is like a sort of, I think this is sort of linked to as if like the scientific method, this is an outcome of scientific method. So he says that physics reaches this point of positioning nature in this way. However, this is a metaphysical incident. But this is this issue of like if we sort of jump to the idea of like how we sort of the freedom we give to sort of how we think about the thinking and how we sort of, or whether it's sort of applied, it's sort of how the event is in that, and then sort of after that outcomes. So he says, which is not we the humans who come upon these thoughts. The thoughts come to us mortals, whose essence is set upon thinking as its ground, whose essence is set upon thinking as its ground.
Remembering that essence is the impending and the prevailing, not the substance. That's the crucial thing here, yeah.
So it's sort of
well, when he, hold on a second, sorry. I don't. I had one of the last pages.
Very proud of you. We're on page 3. It's a miracle. Fantastic.
But so the next question.
Wait, did everybody get that important point that you were making?
Oh well, because actually why I brought that up is because he sort of in the introduction it sort of refers to his bluntness in relation to the sort of kind of not the Nazi kind of thing, and then I was thinking, and then it says this reference to annihilation, and so it's almost as if he's sort of saying the essence of technology as the scientific method is what this like brought us to this sort of result, but is this standing reserve with it becomes a bit like an excuse, whereas really at any point in time one can adopt the position of having sort of obedience to the event. It's like I suppose there's a politicality in lending your ear to this sense of the event, which is different, which you don't have to, like you can't, it's just almost like, if you're saying like, there was a sort of, in the way that people were thinking, in this commonsensical way, there was a brainwashing, as if they didn't have any choice, or as if there wasn't any power or break with that for them to escape out of it. Whereas, we're all sort of, we're all overpowered by this other event, so it's not as if you're blocked into that. You have to, so...
What's the other event that we're overpowered?
Well, this event, in the more the diverting sense of the event that Heidegger's trying to sort of bring in, which is the sort of freedom, because so it seems, well, I don't know, so I was wondering...
I'm going to stop you right there, because I'm going to go back to Grace, and it looks like he's now having a nervous breakdown. Not me again. I told you I was ill. And here's what I think one needs to think through on this level. One is that you said that somehow thoughts come to us. So it's kind of like getting a cold or something. You're walking, you're minding your own business, and suddenly you come down with the flu. Is that what he means by thoughts coming to us?
Well, I think there's something, there's different sort of practices that always can be in play, but there's always like a phenomenon out of them that is going to bring in something that is irreducible to that, and he's saying there is that other freedom.
And that other freedom, could that conceivably be, big leap here, the supernatural?
Well, it depends on what sense you mean the supernatural. What? Depends what you mean by the supernatural.
I don't mean God.
Because he talks about, elsewhere he talks about sensuous and suprasensuous. So
extrasensory, let's say.
I can't remember how he positions. There's three things he positions.
Can we answer this?
Yes.
Obviously no.
Almost, yes.
Obviously
No. Right, and why is it no?
But because he said so. He does. It's quite.
That's a very good reason.
You can say the foundations of physics, you can say. But if it's coming from the past, I would suggest looking up on this. It's the dead past, as in the transmitted maybe memory kind of thing. It comes to supplemental, tertiary memory. It's the memory that's in the technology, or whether it's the pen, all the way through to the atomic computer,
Or all the way through to a dead person, let's say.
Yeah.
So a dead
photograph of the dead, one of the books of the dead. These guys, well, he's alive, but he's dead. You know.
But literally like in the seance scenario. So you could say that the,
Yeah, I like the metaphor.
right,
It's just the ghosts are not.
but let's say the authenticity of it comes as the history recedes.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Yes, that's why I
On
wanted
page
to
one.
alert Grace to this.
It is, I had a couple of years ago a discussion with Daniel about this. And since he's working on photography, we were thinking of light. Now, here we see colors.
Here we see colors.
If we switch the light off for tonight, the colors will be gone. There will be shades of a bluish gray, maybe, or even less than that. And there is something in the argument that it makes, which is precisely as shining a light on something. And once that light has been shown on the thing, you have one landscape out of many possible, possibly infinite possible. But any light you will shine on things will create one landscape with a different, depending on the light of the day, kind of light, all this. And it's one event, it's one distribution, one taste or nuance of things.
So the event is always a multiplicity, but creates itself in a
Then
singularity.
then it becomes solid and is one. Then it goes back and becomes the history. No. Only if we draw this light, we are on that blurry or fading off horizon of dawn or dusk, where more is possible. This is where I hear this argument fitting into
It's
your
phenomenology.
Yes, it is, absolutely. But the idea of, especially because Grace is referring to photographs, even most of this is black and white photograph, and the idea of emerging in photography.
And the ectoplasma.
Yeah, all that. It has to do with this thing that, it's like that the tacky movie with Michelle Pfeiffer and Rutger Hauer in the 80s where he's turned into,
I'm sorry, Grace.
one can be human during the day and at night is an animal. The other one can be human at night and during the day is another animal. But they're in love, so they can't really meet. But when in the church there is the first light coming in on one side and still dark in the other, so they can see they're both human for a split of a second.
I don't know this movie.
It's very stupid, but it's a good example of these things.
I like when we use the metaphor the other week of the psychotic or neurotic haunted by their memories.
Yes.
That was more interesting. I don't do films, so.
But to push that further is that what keeps one human is the fact of being neurotic. Otherwise, this is Freud's argument. Otherwise, human is just a closed entity. So neurosis keeps the unconscious from closing, basically.
Doesn't it bring back any experience?
Yes, it does. I'm not. I'm just giving a.
As you said, the experience of that, those moments, intense emotion.
I don't
have
agree
no
with the argument
significance.
that experience teaches us nothing.
Yeah.
I think that the problem is that whatever it teaches, people just can't hear it. It's almost like.
Yeah, that's his
point.
That's his point. I mean, there is the there is another take on this, which is Gambit, which is I don't like.
Don't bring that in.
But he refers to another work of Heidegger, which works on the poems of Rilke.
Mm-hmm.
And to sum it up, is thinking: would the animal who is not trapped by language or by all their own construction of
The house of
metaphysics,
language,
the
yeah.
house of language or construction of metaphysics, have a better or more privileged position to deal with the purity of being? And he concludes saying, well, it's not really a question we can ask because the animal doesn't have this problem. It's not, there isn't any awareness, there isn't there is no call on the animal to respond to being. This is what makes human beings to be called to respond to being. So it is a.
But again, I think that's. I mean, not to get into the animal versus species argument, but on the other hand, I do think when those arguments are made, they're always taking as a given what they're trying to
Yes,
prove.
but what the reason why I brought this up is that because the problem is there is something that is elusive and is constantly withdrawing and constantly almost trying to seduce us in seeking it. So this is the reciprocity and the continuous activity, which is always the same, because it brings to the surface the present.
And could that be summarized in the word curiosity?
Yeah.
In which case, certainly, other animals are curious.
Yeah, so they would extend it beyond.
Yeah.
Beyond, yeah.
Yeah, so just pushing that. Lauren, go on.
Oh, cool. Should I jump in?
Yeah.
I mean, he talks, he draws, oh maybe I should, well, he refers to, I think on page 86, he brings in he brought this state of affairs into the I equals I, so we've gone from A equals A to I equals I. I equals I is in distinction to the principle of identity. A equals A. I equals I is determined by content. But
What does that mean? I mean, again, it's one of these kind of profound philosophical remarks that you just think, why? Why is this, A equals A, I equals I, T equals T? What's the argument here? What's being put forward? Why is this considered? Because here he's referring to Fichte's.
oh, he says it's, well, he says the statement I am I.
I am I. Just to be clear.
Yeah. Is the expression for that deed of the I, i.e. the subject by which the principle A equals A is posited. The principle I equals I is more encompassing than the formal universal principle A equals A. So when then we're getting into the subject, I guess, first thinking is not the object for the basic principles, but rather their subject. Oh, and then he gets, yes, this comparison between genitive, I can't say it's sub-inectivus, and genitive,
genitivus subjectivus.
Then I've got in brackets, basic principles as the subject of thinking, and basic principles for thinking.
Mattia, we'll call on your Latin.
Genitivus subjectivus and genitivus objectivus.
And that means?
Well, subjective genitivus is the second. Latin had declinations, variations of how you pronounce a noun, depending on how it is placed, which role it had in the sentence. So you could say, if I am Mattia is one form, this is Mattia's book, that's the Saxon genitive, where it had another designates. Take the book and another designates and so forth. But the genitive here is like partitive, is when you say you get something of it. I think. It's transcendental.
Well, in Spanish, for example, you would say, if you were going to say, I forgot the book, you wouldn't say, I forgot the book, you'd say, se me olvidó, which means the book forgot itself to me.
Yeah.
And that's the genitive. The book takes something in relationship to the me that stands there. And in a certain sense, you don't end up blaming yourself. You end up blaming the book, which had the temerity to forget itself in relationship to me. And that's, so there's a partaking and a distancing that goes on. That's what I'm trying to get you to hear.
But this bit is a key bit when it comes to, well, both these bits are, so page 88, anyone who would proclaim today that the question has been unanimously decided would be a swindler. He proffers something.
And which question is this?
Well, I mean, if I get to the, I can't think of I'll remember which question it is, because it's out of context.
It's the question about thinking.
Oh, okay.
Just so we're clear when you hear it. Yeah, okay, go on.
Anyone who would proclaim today this question has been unanimously decided would be a swindler. He proffers something as science that is not science, that can never be surely
Such.
because no science reaches that point where the place of origin, which is the key for the bit. So, because no science reaches that point where the place of origin for the basic principles of thinking could perhaps be discussed.
And here we get to Barnaby's identity, right, because it gets into darkness.
Yeah. Let us calmly admit it, the provenance of the basic principles of thinking, the place of the thinking that posits these propositions, the essence of the place named here, and of its location. All of this remains veiled in the dark for us. The dark, however, is the secret of the light. The dark keeps the light to itself. The latter belongs to the former, thus the dark has its own limpidity.
Which means clarity. Limpidity is clarity. The dark, rather than obscuring things, clarifies. So again, we go back to the ghost. We go back to the dead, or the semi-dead, or the walking dead, or the dark side. Of, in this case, the supernatural, because I just want Grace to hear this kind of thing. It's that which keeps the light not on, but to itself. It's a very odd. Thus, the dark has its own limpidity. It has its own, not logic, but clarity. Yes?
Rachel Witherhead, early installations, the negative
Yeah.
molds of rooms.
Yeah. Everyone knows her work? Okay.
That might quite work here as...
Wait, can you say her name clearly? So
Rachel Witherhead?
No, it's Whitehead. No, that's not right, is it?
Whiteread.
Whiteread, that's it.
I
Yeah.
pronounce her name right.
Yes, Rachel Whiteread.
She used, you know what?
No, she doesn't, but Diane doesn't.
It's she used to make negative molds of interior spaces. She was doing this in the early 90s.
So, for example, in this room,
she would
pour in
plaster completely all the walls, and then the famous piece was the old house. Then the walls would be taken away, and you would have and you would remain with the inner cast of it.
Except for the fact that the house that she bought could have housed like 7 families.
Right.
And so there was a lot of protests that went on.
Really?
Yeah, when the house was taken apart.
And
I see.
Yes.
now, what is here? It says, Heidegger writes on the bottom page 86 about the genitives. The genitive in the title, Basic Principles of Thinking, is a genitivus subjectivus. But the basic principles are also for thinking. They concern it, and then it goes on. So it becomes a genitivus objectivus. So the idea that thinking, which needs to keep in mind is one with being, is much bigger than what we use of it. As one could say, language. Nobody controls language, we all participate of it, and yet it's nowhere else. Now, it isn't transcendental in this way, but it is as if we would be living in a space of which we see the interior like Rachel Witherhead casts, but the outside is infinite, and things can surface from the infinite into our dimensions. And that's the game between historical beings that we are and being as the pure being.
It's the darkness. The darkness being.
This is why I thought that this image could to me seems to fit at least.
Mm-hmm. No, I think it's quite good. What do you think, Lauren?
Oh, I was just trying to...
Okay,
Connect
what
it.
did you think? Does anybody want to comment on Matthias's remark? Okay, continue.
Yeah, this question. We ask, does the principle of identity in form A equals A hold because thinking as the I think posits it, or must thinking posit the proposition because A equals A is the case? What does is mean here? Do the basic principles of thinking stem from thinking, or does thinking stem from what the basic principles posit? What does posit mean here?
And who's asking that question, you or Martin?
Mark.
these were all Martin's questions. So I think like I hadn't managed to read out
No, that's
the rest
good.
of this sort of beyond picking out what I thought that Greg was saying what was key, but I haven't managed to sort of simulate it into then saying, clearly this is what I think is.
That's right. I think we've gone very far. This is quite further than I thought we would get today. So, do you want to summarize what from point 79 onward? No, without looking. Like what do we have on the table now? What? Don't look at the time. How about that?
Well, he's contrasted common sense laws of thinking, these formulas with how they work in Hegel, to really sort of emphasise how the contradiction that Hegel brings out, that brings a ground that sort of is this is oppressive in the general laws of thinking.
Yeah.
And then he's trying to contrast this other event that there is in the is, and because then he makes the question, well, if there weren't human beings, would there be this other is? So like, is this event just a sort of, is this other sense of the event only sort of to do with natural, or is it something that happens in thinking? Can thinking have this other kind of event? So I think he's saying that thinking you can have this, you can be alert to this, here in thinking, which was something about the imposter, the impending and the imposition. The imposition, the claim of the imposition in relation to the future. So the great tradition comes as a gift of the future, while the past recedes away into what he calls the concealed essence of its gathering. But so he's sort of working towards you getting to this sort of this concealed, this contrast between the concealed and the unconcealed. So, like he says, yet even the first elucidation of the title, Basic Principles of Thinking, led us instantly into the dark, where the basic principles stem from. Blah, blah, blah. This is concealed from us. I'm not sure that's quite. Summarising.
So, what would you say? What would you take away from this bit of what you told us today?
Well, he also sort of leads up to sort of he contrasts Hegel and Marx. But I didn't get really into that. Well, it's the critical thing is how the is being thought of, and so what is being rejected there, and how the principles of thought can't be proven. The principles of thought, they have to arise as an event that you have to be sort of alert to.
Good. It's very good. Any questions so far? I don't mean that like the end of the seminar. I mean, any questions so far?
Say that sentence again. The principles of thought.
Well, the principles of thought can't be proven to be so. Principles of laws, they are themselves an arising. Yeah, and in Delander, he took.
Don't go to Delander.
Well, if you think of any law, is it sort of a general law or a special
So
law?
the principles of thought can't be. I just want that one because he said it really well, and I can write it down, and then I can remember it. And I can't remember what you were saying. So.
The principles the principles of thinking, like they arise as a event, rather than being something sort of cast in stone that one just sort of suddenly applies all the time. They are the,
Go for it, Diane.
So the principles of thought aren't rules, they arise from stuff.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
That's very good.
Yeah.
Yes. they
It's very
arise.
much like we are reading these
Very
instead
good.
of reading an introduction to it, and then there is no way to read through it. Just go in it, and then you will.
You have to swim in it, and
Yeah.
then you realize you're covered in muck. And then you decide which part do you want to clean off and which part do you want to keep. Which part do you want to steal. That's excellent, Laura. Now, are you gonna do you have any launching into?
Yes,
We only have 21 minutes.
Yes, I would.
However, in 21 minutes we can do quite a
I
bit.
probably said a lot of what I was going to say.
But what I'm going to suggest is we could do this whole thing again next week. I think it's worth, unless you just want to kill yourselves, you don't want to ever hear anything more about identity or A equals A again. Okay, we'll just continue.
About the A, I thought in the week, in the week I would write some of this Hegelian logic out so people can actually see how it goes together. Because I think a lot of the argument is still people trying to grasp what Hegel's meaning, not just what Heidegger's trying to do, but trying to understand what the A and the not A.
I think that's
so
important.
So we get to hear that more.
It's difficult sometimes to kind of differentiate what he's presenting as,
A criticism.
well, as a history, really, history of ideas, whether he's like, this is Hegel, this is Fichte, this is Novalis, whether he's actually criticising them or just baldly stating them or stating them to dismiss them.
It's
Or-
The latter.
It's one of the points, and I think Laura was saying with this, that he's talking about Hegel, but the actual Hegel kind of disappeared almost. That's what's vanished, isn't it? Well, what is Hegel's logic?
But
And
I
he's
want to
talking
be very
about-
clear here
It's
that
not as
it's
simple.
not, he doesn't really care about Hegel. He doesn't care about any of these people. What's really being said here is he's blaming Hegel for something that Hegel may or may not be actually worthy of blame.
You don't have to write a book about him.
What I mean is that it's a straw dog argument. It's like a counterfactual. It really almost doesn't matter that it's Hegel, even though of course it matters that it's Hegel. What I mean by that is that what? No. I don't disagree with that. What I'm trying to say is that it's important to get what Heidegger is saying. Now, I think that's not a bad idea to also get what Hegel is saying in order to see all the nuances of what Heidegger is saying. But for some of you who really just want to know what Heidegger is saying, just on a very basic level, like the salt on your food, really very, very specific. I mean, very, very general in a sense, not specific. I think it's important to read Jean Steinbaugh's introduction, because in it to
How do you spell
identity,
that, sorry?
huh?
How do you spell that surname?
Stambaughh. Ambaughh. She did the introduction to identity and difference, which is the kind of.
Did your translation being in time as well?
Did she?
This is
Oh, I didn't realize
translation
that.
being one of not the.
Huh. Anyway, because in that she basically very clearly, clearer than Heidegger in this sense, explains what it is that what it is that Heidegger is irritated about. Now, there's a lot of argument about whether or not Heidegger was just using Hegel in order to prove a point that is sort of sideways to Hegel. And it is also true that Heidegger writes quite a lot in defense of his position on Heidegger, on Hegel. But I think for right this moment to try and get a sense of why it is that Heidegger, or what it is that Heidegger is doing when he makes this move, whether or not it really is properly the Hegelian move or not, because he also is disingenuous a little bit with Parmenides, for example. And in fact, you could almost say he's disingenuous with almost everyone except for himself. And even with himself, he's sometimes disingenuous. And that's part of the way in which he writes. So I think it would be very helpful for you to do the
Just a
Hegel
little
thing.
bit.
Yeah.
Just so we clear the voice.
But I also think it's crucial to get a sense of this, the way in which this A equals A still isn't clear in your mind yet. I feel like we just hit a little tiny scratch on the diamond, which means that we didn't scratch a whole lot, just a little tiny bit. So it was a very good, tiny bit. With that in mind, you want to just, because what I would like to suggest is rather than you giving your presentation next week, that we basically extend this again, unless you're sick of it.
No, it's fine. I can.
I'd like to, do a bit better, so probably make it both more
Well, I
summarised
said a
than
lot of
you
what
would
I
have
was
got.
going to say by interrupting you. So.
But what I think would be important is if you could present along with Mattia the Joan Stomberg's introduction. I think it will help, and when you think through the introduction, see if it speaks to your work at all, even tiny. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. Okay, don't force it. Can you do that? Or are you doing 15 million other things that you're ready to like die? Okay.
We could leave it 1 week and then I'll do it with Mattia.
Okay. Do you want to do it?
I don't mind what I do, but I won't be here on the 19th.
The 19th,
Yeah.
and next week is the 12th.
12th, that's right, yeah.
Okay,
So, I mean, if that makes any difference to
well, it just means that you would end up doing it the week thereafter.
it's not
Your
a problem.
thing.
Yeah, not a problem. I don't know.
Are people okay to do 2 weeks on Heidegger, or do you want to,
Well, we will.
is that all right? Because what you were going to do, I thought, was the time.
No, I think it was default.
No, I was supposed to be
Yeah,
today
yeah,
as well,
right.
but that was a
Yeah.
bit.
So what I was going to suggest, because I think this is the first time, at least in my PhD seminars that we've had in the past, that we've actually dealt with these lectures, and they're tough. They're much harder than I thought they would be, and they're a little bit painful. So what I'm wondering is, you can continue with your remarks till 4, and then we will back up and try identity and difference of the lecture, of those lectures, moving in between the Freiburg lectures and identity and difference. So in that context, since Grace can't do it this week coming, what about you, Diane? How about if you do Joan Stomberg's introduction?
Okay, if I read it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And by read it out loud,
Uh-huh.
that kind of thing.
Okay.
And then maybe move a little bit into identity.
Okay.
And then what'll happen is that both of you two will jump in and clarify.
A lot.
Yeah? And then the week thereafter, we'll start with difference. You can do the difference one. How's that sound? Yeah? Or is that just, you're not happy with that either? Okay. And what about you, Dane? You want to do difference with Grace?
Give it a go.
Yeah, give it a go.
I mean, I come from difference from Darina. So
Don't do that.
So step back from that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Come from difference here. Yeah, yeah.
Start again.
Okay.
Well, one thing of the third step in that series of lectures, the principle of identity, which is then retaken here, which we presented last week. What Heidegger says is that tradition, he often refers to metaphysics as tradition, so what has been done before him, who is putting himself as eternal, has posited being to which the property of identity applies. So being is identical with itself. And what he's trying to do is actually to turn it around. You don't seem to agree.
No.
And say that what comes first is identity.
That's right.
And so it's not the being of identity, but the identity of being. What comes first is identity, and being, both pure being as essence and historical beings, belong to it. The darkness that we reached with the first two lectures with Lauren he picks it up exactly there when he says that in Parmenides it's saying that thinking and being belong in the same. So that same remains dark. And what he's trying to explain, to reach, is that the sameness is the identity that of which both participate. And that's why then he introduces the whole argument of the event of appropriation, which is an event where they both realize, or we realize, that there is a belonging. One belongs to the other, one is called to the surface from the other. And this is a paradigm shift that is radical because it undoes the linearity of time, the linearity of history, the teleology of dialectics, for what then becomes a surface. No, it opens all the way to the horizon, that avenue that is opened up. And it is, it's extremely complex, but just to introduce it now, on page 110, at the bottom of the page, he writes, the claim of identity speaks from the being of beings. According to the teaching of philosophy, identity is a basic characteristic of being. But now, in Western thinking at its earliest, where the being of beings properly speaks, and properly is a very important word, namely in Parmenides, to, the identical, speaks not only in the sense mentioned, but still in another almost excessive sense. One of the fragments reads, the same namely is thinking as well as also being. Here, what are different, namely thinking and being, are referred to the same. So it almost seems that there is a third element.
So repeat what you're hearing again, because I don't think I caught it. So,
what I hear here is that, actually it does state it below. At the bottom of page 111, beings belong with thinking in the same. Being is defined by an identity as a characteristic of identity. So instead, and then he goes on to discuss that identity is the prerequisite, but that is the support of science and all forms of it. So what he's saying is that instead of reasoning by static essences that are there, and then we deal with them, or then they deal among genres or whatever, but blocks that pre-exist as immobile without relation. We have to start with the relation. And that we've already seen. But what becomes very interesting in this version of the principle of identity, which is not in the other one,
it's not very straightforward, yeah.
Is that is not that identity is a property of being, but vice versa. It's that only once we have the relationship that creates identity, then we have being. We have being, I assume in this case I should try to read it for probably the 10th time and see if it says it somewhere. If it is historical being or pure being. But I find very interesting that it is the logic that keeps it together, not some sort of material or immaterial body that is essence.
And that is the key, because that relation that creates this attraction, the so-called equal sign in this case, or you said this, or maybe Mark said this, that the equal sign was a poor transportation. Maybe you said
Damaged transport.
Damaged transport. And I think it's very nicely put in the sense that this, the way in which something gets pulled together and creates this attraction, this cohesion, this sameness, the belonging. He's then saying, well, the difficulty with that is that it still isn't quite getting out of the original problem he's accusing Parmenides and also then Hegel of being in. That's where the issue starts to come in. That's when he wants to develop a position around difference. Because he's saying that identity, even in this belonging sense, even in the sense where you're having temporality and dimension come into it, still isn't enough. It still ends up being a tautological environment. Even if you add the dimensions in there, you're still not having this relation between thinking, how it comes. And that, he says, that this is what the problem is, and therefore you need to now start focusing on how the difference enters into the picture, which is sort of what you're getting at here, I think.
Yes. Yes. But also there is the first and most important consequence it draws from this. Somehow, at least move it out, because then he goes on to say that the relation between belonging together and together would have been the traditional approach, if we put emphasis on belonging, is relational, more dynamic. There is the event of appropriation. There is a lot to be said on the word appropriation, the proper, the authentic, the proper behavior, the proper meaning of things, which I will discuss next week. But then he opens here the question of technology, as it then does in the question of technology. And that to me remains ambiguous, because if the event of appropriation is a taking place, a making place, an extending dimensions of space, and if what he calls enframing there and positionality here, the Gestalt, is that distribution of us and the world into a consumable framework, that brings as a negative situation. But then it doesn't say. I mean, the only option, it leaves it open, or better, leaves it blank. What is a non-negative or positive way of understanding the relationship with the world? Again, one should go back at the beginning of the lecture and find the belonging together.
Yes. And the longing just to be, that relationship between longing to be and belonging, is the constitution of identity, and yet it has yet to reach difference in that relationship.
But I think that the most important part of this version of the lecture is the difference between identity and being logically first.
That's a very important point. Yeah, that's good. I think we should, I think we need to draw this to a close. I think people are just exhausted, is my guess. Even though we have 6 minutes. All right, we will be exhausted. So we have a plan for next week, and a plan for the week thereafter. And then you're going to bring in your difference with Derrida. Yeah, Derrida and maybe Gustavus.
Okay.
But at least Derrida. Okay. And you'll continue.
I do next week. I am not here the 26th of February. Sorry, I have a travel test.
Oh, that's it.
So don't be on the road.
Don't be on the road. Okay, so you're going to miss Barnaby's.
26th of February.
Yeah, that's when you're going to do your thing.
Unless I know you want this stream live here, because I'm going to test in the morning. And unfortunately, those things have to be booked months ahead.
I understand. Okay. Any questions? He's finished. The Viva should be the 23rd or 24th of May. It's very exciting. I wish he'd come back, but he's so inundated with work right now that he's not sure if he can actually come in. But yeah.
But how does it work now? He's written it all, and he has delivered it to you and to this.
No. Then what happens is that it gets delivered to Turnitin.
Just on this book.
Okay.
And then it gets forwarded to the Faculty Degrees Committee, which then gets forwarded to the University Research Degrees Committee, which then agrees to the
So he doesn't touch it either. So the rest will be...
Well, he's going to have one more meeting with the full committee next week, next Friday. Or actually this Friday.
So the opening of the university has the same one.
But that's true of any university. Because it has to be, because the thing about a PhD is that it has to be a PhD across the board. You know, it doesn't matter if it's in chemistry or philosophy or art. It's got to be first a PhD. And therefore, the University Research Degrees Committee needs to make sure that it feels, weighs, sounds, here, is a PhD.
Even if they are not...
Especially if they're not.
Knowledgeable in the field.
Yes, because the word doctor must be
separate.
Must be universal, despite our positions in universality. When you come in a room with the word doctor, it must hold, no matter where you are. And it means the same thing, the exact same thing, whether it's in chemistry, physics, art. In order to uphold that position, any committee member must be able to read it and know that this is a doctor. Angering, no doubt. Okay. Okay, so, good. See you next week. Thank you, Lauren. That was really good. Yeah, very good.
Going from Australia to
Do you have context?
The family excellent.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, but I might train to 5:30.
Oh, I see, but it was quite good. It was very good.
Big band. She goes to that
good.
pub direct, there's a lot more room in there. Stock exchange, or whatever it is. And I have an orange juice.
Okay, yeah. Of course, yeah.
That's everyone. You've got a rushing on.
What he said in there. Although I thought that the staff
Stock exchange.
it's the drink stuff.
It's actually over my mouth.
Yeah, no, I thought
But if it was easy to
that's
use.
right.
It's a beautiful place. It's not worth it.
You didn't have to tie to us. I'm keen on coming. Okay.
Did he say it? Okay.
Well done, Lauren. Very good. I like your book. Page 3.
Yep. Let me see what we're having.
You've got any brushing off?
Special things.
Social picture.
Well.